Sup folks, welcome to the part 13, of What If Deku Run an Orphanage, Chapter 78, Halloween Part 1. Alright, here's the first Halloween chapter. Enjoy! Izuku had gathered up all the kids in his office, all except for Miu, Kei, and Fukinoko, for an exciting announcement. Alright everyone, as you know Halloween is coming soon, and I have plans for us to fully enjoy the holiday, Izuku said as he saw the excitement in the children grow. Firstly, since we'll be staying up late that night, the classes after Halloween will be suspended. Yee. Fewer children cheered at that than you'd expect, but very few of them looked disappointed. Secondly, we'll be going trick-or-treating, from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., Izuku announced. Yee. Now all the children looked excited to some extent, except Fu, who couldn't care less. And when you all come back, there'll be a Halloween party with with several different events, including pumpkin picking, jack-o'-lantern making, a maze, and of course a costume contest. Izuku continued. You don't have to participate, but if you do, you have to promise not to be upset if you lose. Understood? Izuku got nods all around, but some of the kids had a competitive look in their eyes, which made Izuku a bit nervous. You have the option to make your own costume, have someone else make it for you, or you can ask me to buy one for you, Izuku said, before looking at Shuraku. Shuraku, if someone asks you to make their costume, please do it for them, I'll add it to your allowance. Shuraku's eyes glowed, as she imagined all the Halloween units she could summon on her Gakas. Yes, Daddy. I'll do my best. Alrighty, then, any questions? Izuku asked. Raised her hand. What about Kai, Fuku, and Miu? Are they gonna trick-or-treat with us? Izuku sighed. Unfortunately no. Both Fuku and Miu decided not to because, well, they don't want to. And Kai can't come because, well, he's too big. So instead Kaminari and Mina are gonna watch Halloween films with him until the party. And they all will be attending the party. Yes, even Fuku. This will be the first time she's been in a crowd, so don't overwhelm her, and try to make her feel comfortable. Understood? Once again more nods, before Nara raised her hand. Who is going to be chaperoning us while trick-or-treating? Ken rolled his eyes. We're not babies, we don't need chaperones. Yes, you do, Izuku responded, much to Ken's dismay. You'll all be split up into groups, and watched by myself, Okako, Tsu, Ida, and Yaozu. That makes sense, Nara said. Shuraku was the next to raise her hand. Who is going to be judging the contest? Izuku smiled. That is a special surprise, that I won't spoil for you. Now, are there any more questions? No one raised their hand. Good. Halloween is in a week, so just take that time to get ready. Izuku told them. Now, you're free to go. Immediately the children ran to go think of costume ideas. Absolutely not. Fu refused. Fu didn't really know what he wanted to be for Halloween. He didn't really have any plans for any kind of costume in particular. But when Kiba came into his room and made her suggestion, Fu instantly knew what he didn't want to go as. Please. Kiba begged, giving him the puppy dog eyes he had long since become mostly immune to. I have the perfect costume idea, and it will only be complete if you go in this specific costume. And Kyozai would make it even more perfect. I am not an accessory, Kiba. Fu deadpanned, crossing his arms. And I happen to have some sense of masculine pride left in my undead body. Okay, how much is that pride worth then? Kiba asked him, because there are some great Halloween banners right now, and I'm sure you'd love the chance to summon on them. Right? Fu grit his teeth, as his mind went to all the games he could use that money on. Are you really going to make me sell you my pride? Kiba just continued to smirk, confident that she got him. Because she did. Interesting. I thought you would go with something more predictable. Shuraku said as she looked at Kiba's phone, which displayed the character she wanted to dress up as. Still, I never watched this anime, but the character looks like they fit you. They do indeed. This character is one of the only characters in fiction worthy of my admiration. And as such would be the only character worth dyeing my hair for. Kiba said as she was practically shaking with excitement. This has been my idea for a costume ever since I laid eyes on their anime. Which also brings me to Fu's costume. Fu sighed in the background, regretting letting Kiba drag him all the way over here. Just show her it already. Kiba excitedly showed Shiraku the next character, the character Fu would be dressing up as. Shiraku's eyes widened, and she stared at the image for a bit, in disbelief, before turning to Fu who was looking away from her, blushing more than she'd ever seen him blush before. Are you sure you want to dress up as them? Look, Halloween banners are up, and she is paying me a considerable amount of money to wear that, Fu explained. You understand. You're an addict too. Shiraku gave him a sympathetic look. Alright, as long as you're sure. Of course we'll also need a lot of makeup, a wig, and some props, Kiba said. I want these to be perfect? Fu groaned. Yeah. Perfect? Really? Izuku said as he looked at the notes detailing Kiba and Fu's costumes, and what would be needed to complete them. Fu wants to wear that? More like Kiba paid him to wear it, Shiraku explained. Ah, that makes more sense. Izuku sighed. That girl, at least I don't have to worry about her being financially independent. Alright, well I can get pretty much everything here. The guns will obviously have to be fake though. Yeah, that makes sense, Shiraku responded. Also, have you decided what you want to be yet? Izuku asked her. Shiraku then, unexpectedly, frowned, and her mood seemed to darken. I haven't. That's unexpected, Izuku said. He'd thought Shiraku would have loved this opportunity. What's wrong? Well, it's just. I want to make this special. Shiraku admitted, looking sheepish as her pale cheeks turned red. Normally during Halloween, I would just celebrate by making simple dresses based on ghosts, or pumpkins. I never made a costume because. Shiraku gestured down to her lower body. But this year, it's my first Halloween with my family. I really want to make a costume but Shiraku paused. How do I make a costume when I look like this? I could make a scary costume like a ghost or a spider monster. But those don't feel like they match me. But they would match my body more than something like a princess or fairy costume. I don't know what to do. Nothing feels like me. Oh, Shiraku. Izuku got up and hugged his spider daughter. Your body isn't limited to dressing up as scary monsters. Yes, people can find your spider half to be rather frightening. But there's more to you than just that half. Your upper half has beautiful white skin and hair, and mesmerizing eyes. Maybe you don't have to pick one or the other. Scary or pretty. Maybe the key is finding a way to combine the two somehow. Combine the two, Shiraku repeated, as her eyes widened. It was then the dam broke. Suddenly dozens of ideas started to form in her head, and the creativity block she had suffered was long gone. That's it. Shiraku was so happy she almost cried, looking at her father with a huge grin on her face. I know exactly what to do now. Oh, thank you, Daddy. Shiraku hugged him back, hard enough that Izuku could feel his bones creak. Shiraku. You strength. Izuku reminded her urgently. Oh. Sorry, Daddy. I just got excited. Shiraku released Izuku from her death grip and immediately made a beeline for the door. I have to start making designs. I'll show you when it's ready, Daddy, you're going to love it. Slam. And she was gone. Once Izuku got over his bones almost being crushed, he smiled. This is the best part of my job. Fukunoka looked over her work that was splayed across her bed, with dissatisfaction. No. Oh, why can't I get this right? Stupid, useless Fuku. Knock knock knock. EAP? Fuku jumped a bit when someone knocked on her door. Who is it? It's me. Shiraku. Truku said on the other side of the door. Can I come in? Please. I want to ask you a favor. A favor? Fuka felt nervous. What kind of favor? I just want you to draw some things for me, Truku explained. Can I come in? Please. Fuka hesitated. She didn't know Truku super well, but she did make her hoodies, and she loved her hoodies. This seemed like the least she could do in return. So after working up a bit of courage, Fuka opened her door. Truku crawled inside and gave Fuka a thankful smile. Thank you. You were the only one I could rely on here. Rely on me? Fuka blushed. I doubt I'm the best person for the job. Nonsense. Besides Daddy, you're the best artist here. Truku pointed out. But I want to keep this a secret from Daddy. I don't want him to see my costume until Halloween. Oh. You wanted me to make you a costume. Fuka frowned, and looked back at her own attempt at a costume on her bed. This of course drew Truku's attention, as she looked at what Fuka was staring at. Is that a blue shirt? Ah. Fuka jolted when she realized what she did, and quickly grabbed the shirt, before hiding it behind her back. Don't worry about that. Let's just focus on your costume. But Truku ignored her, and simply went up to her and grabbed the blue shirt, taking a closer look at it. It looks handmade. Did you make this? Fuka looked down at the floor, ashamed of herself. I know it's bad, and it must be an insult to someone like you. I'm sorry for even trying. No. It's pretty good. Could use some touching up, a lot of touching up. But it's not bad. Truku told her. I just didn't know you liked to sew. I try it every now and then, it's just a hobby, Fuka said. Although I wish I was better at it. I wanted to make my own costume but I just can't seem to get it right. Well, then I'll help you. Truku offered. I'll help you learn how to make clothes, and you can help me learn how to draw. Deal? Truku extended her hand out. Fuka looked at it nervously, before taking a look at her incomplete costume and making up her mind. Deal. A week had passed surprisingly quickly, and Halloween was finally upon them. 1A had gotten there early in the morning, to do what was asked of them. Mina and Kaminari were already keeping Kai busy, while most of the other members of the class worked to get the Halloween party set up. Of course, the exceptions were Okako, Ida, Tsu, and Momo, who were dressed up and ready to escort the kids. For some reason, there seemed to be a fantasy theme among all of them. Okako was dressed as some kind of hooded mage, complete with a wooden staff. Tsu was dressed as a barmaid. And both Ida and Momo were dressed as knights. Wow, you guys look great. Izuku said as he came down the stairs in the main hall to meet them. Oh, whoa. Okako as well as the rest of her friends were shocked when they saw Izuku's costume. Now, one might expect Izuku to dress up as All Might. And if this were every other Halloween they'd be right. But for this new and special Halloween, Izuku wanted to try something new. And thus his costume here was Pinhead from Hellraiser. Okako was speechless as Izuku walked towards them, looking just weird. This is not what I expected from you, Midoriya, Ida said, getting over his own shock. I don't anyone expected this from Midoriya, Tsu said. It is rather strange, Momo added. Yeah, I wanted to go with something different. New me, new kinds of costumes, you know. Izuku gave a nervous chuckle. Too much? No, it's just unexpected, Okako said. Well, I guess that's what I was going for. Izuku chuckled. The kids should be here any minute, so I guess we just alright, let's start the candy hunt, shouted Ken. Hey, wait up, doofus. Nara yelled. The two came down the stairs in their fresh and new costumes. Ken was Omni-Man from Invincible. And Nara was just dressed as a witch. Alright, we're ready to go. Ken said eagerly. What do you think of my costume? Awesome, right? It's certainly well made, Tsu said. Yeah, You look like a real superhero. Okako praised him. Nara rolled her eyes. More like a super dweeb. Yeah, have fun dressing up as mass murderer bro. Oh come on, he had character development after that. Ken argued. He did a lot of great things. Doesn't make him not a mass murderer. Nara retorted with a smug smirk. Before their argument could progress much further, the next group of kids came downstairs. "We're ready, Daddy." Came running down the stairs, followed by Eri and Kyaku. Was predictably dressed in a snake costume. Was it very creative? No. Was it very Yes. Eri was also dressed as something more predictable, a unicorn. Lastly, there was Kyaku, who was dressed as Jason Voorhees. Yep. I can't wait to scare the heck out of people. Kyaku shouted with excitement, as she waved around her fake machete. Are you sure that is an appropriate costume for her? Ida asked Izuku. Izuku shrugged. It's what she wanted to be. I'll look at you too. You're so cute. Okako said, leaning down and hugging the two girls. Thank you. K giggled, hugging her back. You look great too, Okako. Why yeah, Eri said, a bit more flustered about this. Then the next group of kids arrived. Dad, we're ready. Netsu shouted as he came down, followed by Yami, Yonda, Atako, and Sanson. Netsu was dressed up as the Human Torch from the Fantastic Four. Unfortunately, the clothes had to go over the flames, unlike how it was with the actual character, but if they tried to do it the other way, then that would result in him setting everything on fire. Yami was the Grim Reaper, which made far too much sense. He was basically just wearing his own Aegis robe, along with a plastic bone scythe. One thing to note was that unlike Izuku, where you couldn't see anything of his face as long as the hood was on, you could still see Yami's glowing red eyes, making it even creepier. Yonda was simply dressed up as a princess in a pink dress, with a golden crown. Simple, but it made her happy. Atako probably had the most simple costume. He was a ghost, with a white sheet thrown over him, and some eye holes coming out. Again, simple, but given his appearance, there wasn't much he could do, and unlike Shuraku, he didn't care enough to think about it. He was just happy to be here. There was also an argument that could be made that Sanson had the most simple costume, but also the most accurate. She was dressed as Rimuru Tempest from that time I got reincarnated as a slime, particularly she was dressed up as his slime form, which was just a ball of blue slime with black lines for eyes, so all Sanson had to do was ask Izuku to dye her body that same shade of blue, and then add some black pencils for the eyes. She was also staying in Rimuru's standard blob shape, although she was bouncing around even more than normal. Wow, you two are really scary, Tsu said to Atako and Yami. They're simple but effective. Thanks, Yami responded. Atako singed thank you as well. What do you think of my costume? Yonda asked everyone, doing a twirl to show it off. It's pretty. Okako thought. A princess, such a simple, yet appropriate costume. Ida thought. Cute. Thought Tsu, it's refreshingly childlike. Momo thought. You look even more like a princess than normal. Izuku smiled at her. Yonda smiled at him and hugged his leg. Cute. Everyone thought. Come on, we're going to make everyone late. Came Kiba's voice from upstairs. We wouldn't have to worry about that if you didn't take so long adjusting the wig. Came Fu's voice. Well, it had to be perfect. If you're going to do this, then you might as well do it right. Kiba argued. You have a point. Fu sighed. Hearing them coming downstairs, Izuku quickly turned to the kids. Now kids, I don't want you making fun of each other's costumes, especially Fu's. If you do, then half your candy goes to Fuko and Miu. What's Fu's in particular? Tsu asked. Did Kiba force him to dress up as something embarrassing? You'll see. Izuku sighed. A few seconds later, Kiba and Fu came downstairs. Everyone looked at Fu in shock. And both Ken and Kyaku had to hold in their laughter. Kiba was dressed as Alucard from Hellsing Ultimate. getting everything right down to his black clothes and red coat, to his red hat, to his glasses. Heck, she even dyed her hair black, and had fake guns to match. And Fu was dressed as Sarah's, from Hellsing Ultimate. This included her yellow uniform, as well as her skirt, and stockings. Kiba had even used makeup to make his skin more in line with the characters, as well as colored contacts, and a wig. Oh my god. Okako forced down a laugh and gave the boy a sympathetic look. Well, it's certainly well done, Ida responded, completely stunned by this. That girl. Tsu, face-palmed, shaking her head at Kiba's antics. Wow, Dad, did we get a new sister? Cast is Yuku. Yeah, when did that happen? Netsu added. Fu sighed. No, it's me. Eh? Both Netsu and gasped, having not quite figured out it was Fu up until this point. Fu. Oh wow, your costume is amazing. Praised. I didn't even know you were a boy, you're so pretty. Yeah, I thought you were a girl too. Netsu added, giving him a thumbs up. Nice job. Fuzite Witch. Thank you. How much did Kiba pay you to wear this? Nara asked him, already guessing how the vampire girl managed this. A lot, Fu said, before turning his gaze to Kyaku and Ken, who were still trying not to laugh as hard as possible. I don't want to hear a word about this, from either of you. Hey, is someone going to talk about my costume? Kiba pouted. You look cool too, Kiba. Net surprised her. I like your hair. Yes, it looks good in black. Yonda added. HMPH. That will do for now. Kiba said. Then they heard more footsteps coming down the stairs, belonging to the last child left. Everyone looked up, as Shiraku came down. Shiraku's costume was vastly more unique than anyone else's, not being based off a character or basic Halloween type of thing, it was completely original. Her costume looked to be based on a shrine maiden, but darker, and with some spider-based elements. The normally white upper part was instead black, with some red thrown in. She had a hood which went down to her back like a cape, and while the part around her head was the same black and red, the part going down her back was obviously webbing and had a web-like design. The long sleeves, instead of having red lines along the edge of the sleeve, instead now it was red spiders. And instead of the lower half being red, it also looked like webs, much like the back of her hood. And the red bow around her waist had 6 frills on it, 3 of both sides, making it reminiscent of a spider. She even had a small staff, with a red spider with frills for legs at the end. Heck, she even painted some red patterns on her spider half. It was a very intricate and well-designed costume that had everyone in awe. Wow! Gasped, looking at her sister with stars in her eyes. You're beautiful, Yonda said in astonishment. So cool. Netsu said. Wow, that looks amazing, Shiraku. Nara praised. Now I'm starting to wish I put more effort into mine. It's so pretty, Iri said, seemingly mesmerized by the costume. To think something of such high quality could come from a child, Ida said, before giving applause. Bravo! Bravo! Such hard work and dedication. It's truly an amazing costume. Not just that, but the creativity on display, Momo said, as she got a closer look at the costume. It's astounding. Shiraku had a huge grin on her face, as this time tears of joy did come from her eyes. Thank you. I worked really hard on it. The spider girl then turned to Izuku, who smiled fondly at her. Did I find the right balance, Daddy? It's perfect, Izuku said, leaning down and hugging her once again. But I didn't do it alone. Shiraku said, as she broke the hug, and looked up the stairs. I had some help from a certain someone. There was a long pause, before more footsteps could be heard coming down the steps. And down came Fuku, in a Link from the Legend of Zelda costume. But it wasn't some slapped-together green tunic and hat, no, this was a perfect recreation of the Link outfit as seen in Breath of the Wild. Starting from the ground up, She had on his brown boots and light-colored pants. Next was the iconic blue tunic, which was decorated, just like how it was in the game. As well as having 3 belts, 2 around her waist and 1 across her chest, 1 to hold the quiver full of arrows on her back, 1 to hold her Sheikah slate, and 1 to hold her master sword, scabbard, Hylian shield, and bow. She was also wearing an undershirt that sleeves showed outside of the tunic, and the brown glove on her right hand, with her other hand exposed. Lastly, she even dyed and styled her hair, to look more like Link from that game, including a ponytail, although her bangs were noticeably shorter than Link's. One last detail was that her left hand was painted the Triforce of Courage, that Link obtained in Breath of the Wild sequel. Once again everyone was amazed, both by the detail and work that went into the costume, the fact that Fuuka was wearing it, and the fact that Fuuka had shown up. "Wow, you!" Ran up to Fuuka the moment she sheepishly arrived down the stairs. "Fuuka, you look so cool." "Why do?" Fuuka seemed surprised by this sudden praise. "I mean, me and Shrek worked really hard on this, and I was really happy about how it turned out, but I was also nervous that I missed something or it just didn't fit me. So I was really nervous about how I would look, and I'm talking too much, aren't I?" "You're fine," Shrek said, going over to Fuuka and holding up her left hand to her face. "Remember this, right?" "Courage," Fuuka said, as looked at the painted-on Triforce fragment. "You look great, Fuuka," Eri said, eager to support her. "I definitely didn't expect you to wear something this dashing," Yonda said. Sansan made a hand come out of her body and gave her thumbs up. "All you guys." Fuuka blushed intensely. "I think you look good too, Fuuka," Fu said. Thanks. Fuuka froze when she saw Fu. "Fu?" "Yep." Fu sighed. "Oh. I didn't know you were into that kind of thing," Fuuka said. "I mean, I'm dressed as a guy, so I'm not going to judge." Fu didn't even bother to respond to that. Having lost all will to resist at this point, and just going with the flow. "And that's not all. Fuuka is going to go trick-or-treating with us," Shrek announced. "Really?" Izuku's eyes widened in shock before he turned to Fuuka. "And you agreed to this?" Fuuka nodded, looking back at the mark on her hand. I am the brave hero of the wild. Link. I can't just hide away like a coward while I have the Triforce of Courage on my hand. It wouldn't make any sense. So I decided that I would go out and have fun with all of you." Eri and looked at her with amazement, and everyone else was surprised by this as well. Okako went to Izuku and whispered in his ear. "Are you sure about this? What if her quirk goes off?" "She's gotten a lot better control of it after we started training," Izuku said. "And she knows what to do if she feels overwhelmed. Right, Fuuka?" Fuuka nodded. "Run away so no one else gets hit by the gas." "That's right," Izuku said. "Well, then I don't see any issue with her going." "Yay!" cheered, before hugging Fuuka. "I'm so excited." Eri joined the hug, and once again Fuku's face was redder than a tomato. "Alright everyone, it's time to split up into groups," Izuku announced, before turning to Okako and company. "Could you guys spread out please?" They all nodded and spread out amongst the room. "Okay, so Group A will be going with me," Izuku said. "Group A will be Shrek, Eri, Fuuka, Kiba, and Fu. Next will be Group B with Okako. This will be Kyaku, and Ako. Group C will be with Tsu. This group will be Yami, Yonda, and Sansan. Next will be Group D going with Ida and Yaozu. This group will be Netsu, Ken, and Nara. "Why does our group have 2 people watching us?" Ken protested. "Because I know you're the most likely to try and pull some Halloween trick that'll cause everyone a lot of headaches." Izuku deadpanned. "Yeah, that's fair," Nara admitted. "Don't worry, I'll do my part to make sure he stays out of trouble." "Thank you," Izuku said. "Alright, everyone. With that out of the way, time to trick or treat. So yeah, I bet you weren't expecting some of those costumes. Let's talk about them a bit, shall we? Author's notes. First, we have simple costumes. Like Iris, X, Yondas, Atakos, and Naras. Simple costumes for simple folk. Naras is obviously a reference of her inspiration Gwen from Ben 10, as she learns magic in the show. Now for the more specific choices. Starting with Ken, the Omni-Man costume is also kind of a reference to Ben 10, as Ben often wears outfits similar to Superman's, and I couldn't use Superman, for reasons that will become clear eventually. Netsu's was also rather obvious. The same with Yami. And Sansan. Kyaku's just fits her personality. Izuku's costume is a reference to a strange drawing that I think the author of MHA made. I think. And of course, Okako, Ida, Tsu, and Momo's costumes are references to their fantasy attire. Now moving on to Kiba and Fu's costumes. I wanted something a bit less generic for Kiba's. I could have made her Dracula, or something generic and grand, but Alucard was both unique and fitting. As for Fu's, once again, this is way more unique than a zombie or a Frankenstein's monster, and much funnier. Not to mention this is definitely something Kiba would force him to do. Now for Shiraku. Coming up with a costume with her was difficult, but because of her character, I had to make it grand, and focus on it. So making her something simple like a ghost was not an option, and finding a character for her to dress up as would be pretty much impossible too. So, I had to make something more original. Hope you like the idea. And lastly, Fuku's costume. I'll go into more detail next chapter on why she chose that specific costume. Also, more characters will show up at the party, such as Kota and Mei, so look out for that. Chapter 79, Halloween Part 2. Randamuo hated Halloween. Every year, brats would come up to his door, in cheap store-bought costumes, and interrupt whatever he happened to be doing at the time. So he was in a pretty bad mood when he was just sitting on his sofa, watching TV when the doorbell rang. Ugh! Ran groaned, as he got up and grabbed the bowl of candy sitting next to him. It wasn't like he could ignore them. His wife always got on his case if he ignored even a single trick-or-treater. And she always knew. Ran went up to his door and opened it. And boy, this was not what he was expecting. There were 5 little girls and 1 teenager outside his door. Now that part wasn't the unexpected part. The teenager was probably just one of these kids' older brother, who was forced into chaperoning their little sister and her friends. It was their appearances that were off-putting. The first thing he noticed was the girl, whose bottom half was a spider. Now, Ran wasn't a quirkist. He thought people who judged others based on something they couldn't control were scum. That being said, he was, like many, arachnophobic, so seeing this girl scared the shit out of him at first. However, knowing that this was wrong, Ran quickly focused on her upper half, which actually was easier than you'd think because the costume she was wearing, some kind of spider-themed shrine maiden, was both creative and rather pretty. So if the goal was to make a costume so good it took people's attention off her spider body, then he mentally applauded the tailor who made this. There was also a girl that was dressed as Link. That wasn't very notable in and of itself. What was that she was shaking in terror? Seriously, someone help this young girl. The other one that really boggled his mind was the teenager, who was wearing a Pinhead from Hellraiser costume. How did this kid even know about that character? It's so old. All the other girls were less mind-blowing. 2 seemed to be dressed up as some kind of anime characters, and 1 was dressed up as a unicorn. Trick or treat! Yelled all the kids except the one dressed as Link. Wait a minute. Ran looked at the little blonde girl. That was a male voice coming from that one. You what? He wasn't gonna think about it. Maybe they just had a deeper voice, or maybe they were a young cross-dresser. Who was he to judge? Try trick. The one in the Link costume was struggling hard to try and say trick or treat. Is she gonna be okay? Ran asked the teen. It's her first time. the teen explained. First time trick-or-treating? Ran asked. The teen winced. That. Amongst other things. Now, what the hell did that mean? Come on, you can do this. The unicorn girl encouraged the shy one. You're the hero. You can't back down now. The black-haired anime girl added. You can do it, said the blonde girl who Ran was half convinced was a boy. Courage. Remember, you have the Triforce of courage. The spider girl picked up the shy girl's left hand, which had a gold triangle on it. Alright. See courage. The shy girl psyched herself up. Right, trick or treat. Yeah, you did it. All the girls, the teen, and maybe one boy, still unsure about that, cheered for her, before looking at Ran expectantly. Oh here. Ran took candy out of the bowl and gave it to the kids, giving some extra to the shy one because it seems like she should get some kind of reward for overcoming whatever was going on with her. Thank you, said the children and teen, before taking their leave. Well, that is probably the most interesting thing that'll happen to me tonight, Ran thought. Ding dong. Ran sighed, and put down his popcorn bowl, paused his movie, grabbed the candy bowl, and got up to answer the door for what felt like the millionth time today. He opened the door. Okay, another weird one. Altogether there were 2 kids, 1 teen, and 1 adult. Maybe they were a family? Who knows? Now most of them were normal. The teen was dressed as some kind of wizard. The adult had the most basic, uncreative bedsheet ghost costume. One of the girls was wearing a normal snake costume. Mind you, she did have snakes for hair, but that was likely part of her quirk, so he would try not to stare. But the final girl, no older than 8 maybe, is what gave him pause. Now when you pictured a little girl on Halloween, what kind of costume would imagine they would have? A princess? A fairy? A fairy princess? Maybe a female pro-hero? Something along those lines, right? What probably won't come to mind is what the girl is actually dressed up as, Jason fucking Voorhees. Machete included. Why would her parents let her watch those movies? Why would they let her dress up as that mass murderer? Why would she want to dress up as that mass murderer? Honestly, this was probably the scariest costume he'd see tonight, if only for the implications. Trick or treat, said the snake girl, with the other girl staying silent, only raising up her presumably fake weapon, and holding up her candy bucket as if she were mugging him. Not wanting to anger this small girl, Ran quickly put some candy in both of their buckets. But then, much to his surprise, the guy dressed as a ghost also had a bucket of candy, holding it out for him to fill. Ran gave the man an odd look. Aren't you a bit old for this? He's 7, the teen girl told him. Ran's eyes widened in shock, and he was sure his jaw fell to the floor. Oh, that was a 7-year-old? What on earth were they feeding this kid? By the time he got to his teens, this kid was gonna be like 10 feet tall or something. Hey. Sorry about that. Ran laughed nervously, putting some candy in his bowl. It's just he looks older than he is, apparently. The tall boy then proceeded to poke his hand out of his costume and maybe he'd been a bit too quick to say his costume was uncreative. He then started using what he assumed was sign language, which he, unfortunately, didn't understand. He's saying it's okay. It happens a lot, the teen girl said. Thank you for being understanding. Happy Halloween. All of them then started to leave, except for the Jason girl, who stayed there for a minute. Standing there, breathing loudly. It was creepy as hell. Can I help you? Ran asked. The girl then dropped the fake blade, and reached out behind her, pulling something out of the back of her jacket. It was another, slightly smaller machete, this one much more real-looking, and covered in dried blood. What the? Ran fell backward in fear, dropping the candy bowl in the process. The girl just laughed maliciously, before putting the weapon away, and stealing the candy bowl, before running after her group, laughing evilly as she went. After recovering from that shock, Ran quickly got up and closed the door. Never would he ever tell anyone about the time he was mugged by a child. Ding dong. Ran once again paused the TV, got up, grabbed the second bowl of candy because the first one was gone, and went to answer the door. He opened it and Ran screamed the moment he laid eyes upon one of the kids. Turns out, the Jason girl would not be the scariest thing he'd seen today. This kid was dressed up as the Grim Reaper, and it was a damn good costume. A completely black robe, with pieces of white bone all around it. Their face, completely shrouded in darkness, except for two bright red dots that were presumably their eyes. He was also carrying a bone scythe, that did not look like it was made of plastic. The only parts of their body Ran could see were their hands. Being unnaturally pale with pitch-black fingernails. This is exactly what he'd imagined death as an elementary school student would look like. And just when he thought that was the worst of it, he heard a voice in his head. "Are you alright, sir?" He heard a female voice in his head. Ran screamed again. "Who said that? Why are you in my head?" "Sir, please calm down," said a green-haired teenager that looked to be chaperoning the children. "The voice you heard is this little girl's quirk. She can't turn it off, and she can hear your thoughts. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it." Ran screamed in his mind. "How am I not supposed to worry about it? That's extremely worrying. Wait, she can hear me. Oh God, what do I do?" Ran tried to calm himself down, and took note of the full group. There was the aforementioned kid dressed up as Death and the teen girl dressed as a barmaid. Aside from them, there were two more children. One was dressed as a princess, and presumably was the one who was hearing his thoughts. And the last one was a slime. A small, round, blue slime. With black pencils that seemed to mimic eyes of some sort. He honestly couldn't tell the gender of this child. Assuming they had one. Still, Ran was not a particularly strong person. And so when faced with a mind reader and kid death over here, he did, at what he thought, any reasonable person would do. He tossed the candy bowl into the hands of the teen and ran back inside. Once again, he would never tell anyone of the night in which he was scared out of his wits by children. Twice. At this point, Ran didn't even bother watching anything anymore. It was late, so soon enough the hordes of kids would be going back home, and the trick-or-treating stuff would be done with. Ding dong. Ran got up, the third bowl of candy already in their hands, as they opened the door. Oh, one of the kids was on fire. Sure. Why not? That might as well happen. This group consisted of 5 people, this time there being 2 teens and 3 kids. One, as was stated, was on fire, wearing a mostly blue costume with a 4 logo on it. Then there was a kid dressed as some kind of superhero, be it real or fictional he didn't know. And the last one was a plain and simple witch. The 2 teens were dressed as knights. Weird how many groups of teens chaperoning kids while also wearing fantasy-based costumes he'd seen tonight. Trick or treat. The kids said, holding out their buckets, which were full of candy. Well, besides the kid that was on fire, this group seemed relatively normal. At least he wouldn't have to deal with anything weird this time. Splash. And suddenly, the kid in the superhero costume pulled out a hidden water pistol and shot him in the face with it. You know what, Ran was done with Halloween this year. And so the man simple placed the bowl outside his doorstep, closed the door, and went back inside his Yuku, and the rest of his group started walking back to the house, with Kiba and Shiraku carrying the huge load of candy they got. Well, I'd say this was a pretty successful Halloween, Izuku said, before turning his attention to Fuku, who was still on edge, but looked extremely relieved to be going home, while also sneaking glances at the candy pile. And I'm so proud of you for coming outside like this, Fuku. And on top of that, you only had to let your gas 7 times. Yes, we are all extremely proud of you. Kiba smiled at her. You made a fantastic debut to the outside world. And in a truly stunning costume. All you, It's not that great. Fuko blushed, hiding away her face. It's nothing compared to Shiraku's, or Kiba's. I think it's just as good. Eri told her. You did a great job making it. Maybe not as good as Shiraku's, but that's an unrealistically high bar, Fu told her. You worked really hard today, so just accept the praise. Indeed. Today you showed true courage, facing off against terrifying monsters, such as depression, anxiety, and crippling fear. Kiba told her. You gave a battle, worthy of the character you mimic. Yeah. Courage. Fuku looked down at the Triforce on her hand and smiled a bit. Yeah, I was brave. I really went trick-or-treating. Outside. In the city. That's right. And we're also happy you did. Izuku said, giving her a pat on the head. Although I was rather surprised when I saw you choose to dress up as Link of all characters, Kiba noted. I didn't expect something so daring. Do tell, what exactly made you want to be Link in the first place? Well, I've always admired characters like Link. Able to face off against any kind of danger. Explore the world. Have adventures. It's the same reason I admire you, Lady Kiba. Fuko explained sheepishly. I'll never be as brave, or strong as you, or Link, but if I can pretend to be them, even for just a little bit, it makes me feel stronger. Fuku looked down at the Triforce on her hand. I know this is just some paint that I put on my hand, but if I don't think about that, then it really does feel like it's giving me strength. Like I have a goddess pushing me forward. There was a small pause before Fuko turned to look at the group. One day I want to be strong enough to do these kinds of things without shaking in fear. So thank you all for supporting me. It means everything to me. And one day I will be able to do things without clinging to you guys for help. I promise. Everyone smiled at her, happy to see her growing so much. Well, I think this occasion is deserving of a reward, Kiba said, rubbing her hands together mischievously. Everyone, it's time for congratulatory head pats. Wait. No. Fuku gasped, as suddenly the other kids started approaching her, and she pulled out her master sword. Stay back. I have the power of the goddess and anime on my side. Unfortunately for her, neither of those things would save her. Chapter 80, Halloween Part 3. With it now being late into the night, all the groups had finally returned to the house. So, Kyaku, Ken, would you mind explaining these? Izuku cornered the two children, holding up the water pistol and machete respectively. You brought a real machete? Ken asked, looking at Kyaku with a shocked expression. I didn't hurt anyone with it. Kyaku pouted. No, but you did mug people out of their candy. Izuku gave her a stern look. How did you think that was possibly an okay thing to do? Kyaku didn't answer, only looking away guiltily. Izuku sighed. How did you even get this? I found it. Kyaku obviously lied. You found it, Izuku repeated skeptically. Where exactly did you find it? Around. Kyaku replied. Kyaku, whose memories did you mess with to get this? Izuku asked, having figured her out by now. Momo's, Kyaku muttered, slumping over sadly at having been found out. When did she? Actually, I suppose given her quirk, me not tremor, it makes sense, Momo said. Kyaku, what have I told you about using your quirk on people without their permission? Izuku asked her with an upset expression. Not to. Kyaku answered despondently. And so why did you do it anyway? Izuku asked her. Because I wanted to scare people. Kyaku moped. I thought it would be fun. Izuku sighed. And there are ways to do that, without carrying around an actual weapon. You could have asked me if you wanted to give people a Halloween scare. Sorry, Daddy. Kyaku apologized, lowering her head in shame. Izuku sighed. Look, for now, we'll be taking half the candy you got, which is more than fair considering you stole a lot of it. We'll discuss further punishments tomorrow. For now, I want you to enjoy the party, understood? Yes, Daddy. Kyaku sighed. Izuku then turned to Ken. Honestly, not the worst thing you could have done. Still shouldn't have done it, and you know that, but not too terrible. Punishment free? Ken asked hopefully. Not quite. You're losing a quarter of your candy. Izuku told him. Oh you, man. Ken groaned. Be grateful that's all the punishment he's giving you, doofus. Nara scowled at him. Anyone else would have done something much worse. Ken pouted. He knew that was true, which is why he wasn't making such a stink over it, but it still sucked. Although to be fair, he was still getting a lot of candy. All the kids had pulled in an obscene amount of candy. Each one of them filling more than a single bucket. Kyaku had gathered the most. Because she stole it. Yami also got quite a bit more than the others, most likely because, out of fear, Fuko and Shruka would likely be tied for third in candy gathering. With both of them likely getting more candy because of the quality of their costumes, as well as Fuko getting some pity candy. Wait a minute, Sansen, Fu, and Netsu don't eat candy. Okako pointed out. What are they gonna do with their candy? Well, I'm going to give Fu's to Mew, since he didn't get any, Izuku explained. And the rest will be given out as a prize to the winner of the costume contest, and jack-o'-lantern making contest. What? Ken shouted in shock. There was a prize for that? You never said anything about that? I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. You win a contest, you get a prize, Nara said smugly. And it wouldn't have made a difference anyway. No one's beating Shruka at the costume contest. Shruka smirked, feeling confident in her chances. Well, we'll see, Izuku said. Now let's go outside. Class 1A, as well as a few workers, have been setting up the party for us, and I think you'll like what they've done. Izuku was right, the children were in fact very pleased. Class 1A had done a good job, putting up holiday decorations all over the place, as well as setting up tables, and whatever else would be needed for a party. Including setting up tables filled with various snack foods, all themed after Halloween. However, the most impressive work was done by the people who Izuku specifically hired to help change their place up. Firstly, the gardens, which had been mostly empty up until now, was now changed into a full-on pumpkin patch, with full-grown pumpkins included. And second was the pool, which had been filled with dry ice, making it give off a spooky mist. It really was astounding how much could get done in so little time, thanks to Quirks. Man, you really spooked this place up. Ken praised. We tried our best, Kaminari said. All of Class 1A joined in the fantasy theme, with costumes ranging from witches to knights, to adventures. Heck, Kirishima had a dragon-themed costume. Cool. Sansen bounced around happily. And that's not all, Izuku told them. I also invited some extra guests. Then, they heard more people enter the backyard. That must be them now, Izuku said. Everyone looked towards the door, at the 6 guests that came along. In front of them was a Mei, dressed up as Samus in her armor, excluding her helmet which she was holding. Behind her was Kota and the Wild Pussycats, all of whom were in their hero costumes, and Kota was wearing cat ears over his hat, and looked about as happy about that as you'd expect. Yami. Mei ran over to the cloaked boy, greeting him cheerfully. You look absolutely terrifying. Yup. Yami nodded. Knowing there was no actual fear or malice behind her statement, only an objective fact. Mei quickly spotted Fuku and gasped. Link. She went over to Fuku, who gasped, and froze up. That's such a great costume. Mei praised as she looked over the whole outfit. So accurate too. You must have worked really hard on it. Why yeah. Fuku stuttered. Why yours is really good too. I like your arm cannon. Thank you. Mei said, holding up the fake weapon with a smile. Meanwhile, Kyaku walked up to Kota and giggled. Nice ears. Kota's eye twitched. Hey, I watched the Friday the 13th movies too, What was Jason killed by again? Oh right. Water. Kyaku's eyes widened, as she quickly realized where this was going. Kyaku screamed as she ran away from Kota, who started shooting water blasts at her while chasing her. Kota. Mandalay called out to him, about him to chase after him to try and stop the child, but Izuku held out his hand to stop her. She needs to learn to stop antagonizing people, Izuku explained. And getting a little wet isn't a bad way to learn. He's got a point. Pixie Bob agreed. I suppose so. Mandalay sighed. Thank you for inviting us over, by the way. Kota was very happy to get the invitation. Although he was less happy about having to dress up for the occasion, Tiger added. I can see that, Izuku noted. Well, hopefully, he'll forget about it as the party goes on. At least he didn't get it as bad as Fu. Yeah, looks like little Kiba pulled him into something. Ragdoll giggled. Wait, where is Fu? Mandalay asked, not seeing the boy around. Standing next to Kiba, Izuku said, pointing over to Kiba and Fu, who were talking to Mei. Wait, that blonde girl is Fu? Pixie Bob shouted in shock. Damn, he looks good in his skirt. Never would have figured him for a trap material. Please don't refer to any of my kids as trap material. Izuku deadpanned. Please don't refer to anyone as trap material. Mandalay deadpanned. Meanwhile, Fu heard all of this, as he blushed with embarrassment even more. Well, looks like almost everyone is here, Izuku said. Except for Thump. 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 Kai walked in, eagerly joining his other siblings in the festivities. Hey everyone. You're back. The giant boy came in with devil horns on all of his heads, which were a bit small for him. However, they were still huge. I'm here for the party. I've been waiting for this all day. Kai said eagerly. Well, alright, then, the only person we're missing is Mew, Izuku said, before feeling a tug on his pants. He looked down and saw Mew, dressed as a shy guy from Mario. Oh, never mind, Izuku said. Let the party begin. Heck yeah. Mina cheered. Alright everyone. Time to start the pumpkin picking. Taru yelled out, as all the kids got around the new pumpkin patch. Remember, these will be the pumpkins you'll be using to make jack-o'-lanterns out of. So pick wisely. Kiba immediately dashed towards the largest pumpkin. One about as large as her body. Using her immense strength, she lifted the thing over to her head and took it away. Ken, not to be outdone, slammed down on his Omnitrix, and turned into 4 arms, picking up a similarly sized pumpkin, and taking it. Fu didn't even move from his table, instead using Kyozai to grab a moderately sized pumpkin. Something to note is that to go better with the costume, Kyozai turned red, instead of black. Sansan also wanted a big pumpkin, so she bounced over Meida's hand to pick it up. However, it was too heavy, and the pumpkin didn't budge. After a bit of struggling, Sansan heard some haughty laughter, and looked over to the source, to see Kiba's smug face looking at them. Oh? Is the mighty Sansan having issues? With something I did so easily? Kiba asked, looking and sounding smugger than ever. It seems perhaps lifting strength seems to be a weakness of yours? Sansan made one of those anime-irritated symbols appear of her head, before looking back at the pumpkin and trying to figure out how to move it. Then she had an idea, and she made a light bulb appear on her head. Sansan then flattened herself, and went under the pumpkin, before raising it, and bringing it away. And as Sansan dragged it away, she extended a part of her, and shape-shifted it into Kiba's head, sending her smug face right back at her. Kiba glared at Sansan, and Fu rolled his eyes in the background. Mew quietly took a small pumpkin and went to his table. Likewise, Eri, Yonda, and Kyoko took smaller pumpkins, not really wanting to carry any of the bigger ones. K took on of the medium-sized pumpkin, struggling a bit to take it away, but happily doing so. Truku, despite having the strength to take a larger pumpkin, took one of the smaller, medium-sized ones, while Fuku struggled to bring one of the larger medium-sized over to her table. Netsu had on gloves, so he was able to carry over a medium-sized pumpkin to his table. Nara and Atoko picked smaller pumpkins, along with Kota and Amei. And with everyone's pumpkins gathered, now it was time to start carving. Fuko shyly approached Sato, who smiled as he saw her get closer. See, can you? Fuko tried her best to ask for his assistance, while Sato waited patiently. Can you help me with my jack-o'-lantern? Of course. Sato gave her a light pat on the head. Let's get started. See, can I join? Mew said, speaking so quietly that they almost didn't hear him. Amei went over to Yami. Wanna work together? Yami nodded, and the two got to work. Lady Kiba, do mind if your loyal servants step in and offer you some assistance? Mina asked, with Taru right behind her. Of course, Kiba responded happily. But just so you know, I won't tolerate any slacking. Of course, Lady K. Taru said. Some of the other kids went to ask for help, while others worked on their pumpkins by themselves, with careful supervision, to make sure they didn't hurt themselves or do something wrong. After everyone had finished up their jack-o'-lanterns. Alright, then, since Kai couldn't participate, he'll be judging the jack-o'-lanterns, Izuku explained. I'll do my best, Dad. Kai said excitedly, as he eagerly approached. Everyone. I'm gonna rate your pumpkins. Starting with Ken, Kai leaned down all three of his heads towards Ken's creation. The jack-o'-lantern had the symbol of the Omnitrix carved into it, and the fire lighting it was green. Izuku had given them some materials which would allow them to change the color of the fire. Oh. Like your watch. It's really cool. Kai praised. And it's green. I love green. A+. Ken puffed his chest out, looking extremely smug. Kai moved his heads to look at Nara's next. Nara's pumpkin had a cat face carved into it, with a pink flame illuminating it. It's a cute kitty. Kai noted excitedly. It's cute. A+. Nara smiled at him and gave Kai a head pat. Thanks, Kai. Kai giggled, enjoying the head pat for a second, before moving on to the next kid, Sanson. Sanson had carved Rimuru Tempest himself into the jack-o'-lantern, lit by a blue flame. It matches your costume. A+. Kai graded. Is he just going to give everyone A+s? Kaminari asked. Kai moved on to Yami, whose pumpkin had a strange emblem on it, with some sort of eyeball in the center, surrounded by lines, in a circle Salem's emblem, lit by a bright red flame. Spooky. Kai praised. How did you come up with it? Yami shrugged. Saw it in my dreams. Cool. A+. Kai graded. Yeah, he is, Izuku answered. This pattern did indeed continue, as Kai moved on to all the other kids' jack-o'-lanterns. Eri red-flamed apple lantern, X green-flamed snake lantern, Kyaku's scared-faced black-flamed jack-o'-lantern, Atako's white-flamed ghost jack-o'-lantern, Yonda's golden-flamed crown lantern, Shraku's black-flamed spider lantern, Mew's red-flamed shy guy lantern, Fukinoko's blue-flamed Hylian shield lantern, Amei's red-flamed Mario mushroom lantern, Kiba's red-flamed bat lantern, and even Netsu's idea to stick the lantern on his head. Heck, even Fu's and Kota's generic lanterns got A+s. And, so now then literally, everyone got the same grade. It seemingly left them at an impasse. Well, K, it looks like you gave everyone the same grade. Izuku stepped in, not surprised by this at all. Sorry, they're all just so good. Kai apologized. Don't worry about it, son, Izuku said, patting Kai's leg. Do you happen to have a favorite? Kai took a minute to think, looking over all the pumpkins once again. So hard. I like Fuku's. Huh? Fuku gasped, as froze up in shock. Congratulations, Fuku. Ran over and congratulated Fuku, along with Eri. I'm not happy about my loss, but at the very least, I lost to a worthy opponent. Kiba said, taking this surprisingly well. Amei was slightly upset about losing, But she also did really like Fuku's lantern, so that softened the blow. Ken was the most upset about losing and was actually about to say something when his sister grabbed onto his shoulder and whispered into his ear. "Let her have this, or so help me. Me and Kiba will make sure you don't see the light of day." Now Ken was pretty confident in his strength. But he was not confident enough to try and fight both his sister and Kiba at the same time. So he wisely shut his mouth. "Now everyone, it's time for the costume contest," Izuku announced. "That also means, I'll finally be announcing the judges." Suddenly, they heard the back door open again. "And here they are now," Izuku said. Into the backyard came 3 pro heroes. Nezu, dressed in his usual suit, but with devil horns on his head. Which was very appropriate, if a bit lazy. Midnight, who was dressed as a ghost. Or rather, it was a quickly made ghost costume to cover up her actual costume, which was not appropriate for this event, to say the least. And lastly was the symbol of peace, All Might himself wearing a Frankenstein's monster costume. "Greetings children. I am here," All Might announced. "All Might?" shouted many of the children in shock. "Ahaha." All Might laughed, as many of the children flocked to him. "No way. The #1 hero." Ken looked up at All Might with stars in his eyes. "He's even bigger in person than he is on TV," Netsu said with equal amazement. Izuku went over to Nezu and Midnight, while the children were distracted by All Might. "Thank you all for coming. And thank you especially Midnight for not. Well, I couldn't refuse a chance to amaze some cute little kiddies." Midnight giggled. "To tell you the truth, I didn't have many plans for tonight. For whatever reason, I don't get invited to many Halloween parties." Nezu explained. "I think they just don't want to tempt fate," Izuku thought. "Well, I think we should get onto the contest then. Don't want to make All Might stay in that form any longer than needed." "Alright. Everything is set. It's time for the contest to begin," Midnight announced as she, Nezu, and All Might sat behind the judges' table, looking up at the stage. Can the first contestant, Kiba dressed as Alucard from Hellsing Ultimate, come on stage? With that, Kiba immediately ran on stage, showing off her costume, as well as her model guns. "Oh my, what a cool costume!" Midnight cooed. In reality, she thought it was adorable, but that was not what Kiba wanted to hear. "I love that you dyed your hair. Wonderful devotion." "Yes, it's about as accurate as you could be," Nezu said. All 3 judges had pictures of the character the child was dressed as. No detail was overlooked. "You can see the amount of effort that was put in, on both your part and the part of the tailor," All Might praised. Kiba smiled, happily taking in all the praise, and living it up in the spotlight. "However," Midnight said, "if I had to nitpick, and as a judge, I do, your hair is a bit too long for the character. Yes, and I must say, while the clothes do suit you, your small stature does take away slightly from how intimidating the character is supposed to be," Nezu explained. "Wow, these two are really getting into this," All Might thought. Overall, it was done about as well as could be expected, but it held down by some very minor details that would be difficult to solve. Midnight said, "I give it a 9 out of 10. An 8 for me," Nezu said. "Seems fine to me. I'll give it a 10. All Might judged. All Might then leaned down and whispered over to the other judges. "Aren't you guys thinking about this a bit too hard?" "Not at all Might." Nezu laughed. "We must give our 100% in everything we do. Even this. Plus Ultra and all." Meanwhile, Kiba pouted a bit but tried not to look upset. She knew it would be kind of petty to get worked up about this, and so she accepted the few points taken off of her costume with grace. "That leaves you with a score of 27 out of 30. Midnight announced. "Very good, sweetheart, a wonderful start. Well, next year 1I'll do even better. Just you watch," Kiba vowed as she exited the stage. "Alright, now on to the next contestant. Fu dressed as Ares from Hellsing Ultimate," Midnight announced. Fu walked on stage, grumbling about being forced into this, with a slightly red face. The currently cross-dressing boy reluctantly showing off his costume, before allowing Kyozai to come out as a red tendril, adding to the costume's accuracy. My, the character accuracy is quite astounding. Of course, excluding the inclusion of breast, that is. Midnight giggled as the normally expressionless boy became more and more embarrassed. Perhaps Kyozai could help with that. It was then Fu felt Kyozai start to come out of his chest, and he immediately squished him back into his body. "Don't you dare." Midnight was giggling like a madwoman back at the table, at how adorable this was. "Come now, don't tease the poor boy, he clearly doesn't enjoy this." All Might told her. "Well, that's a lie." Yami thought from the side. "I must also praise the accuracy, and all the work put into hiding his gender," Nezu said. "The makeup work, and impeccable wig, make it impossible to tell he's a boy. Guys, come on." All Might said out of sympathy. "Well, it's a very, very nice costume, that you, pull off very well." Fu sighed. "Thank you. Well, I give it a 9 out of 10. Would have been a 10, but no breast." Midnight teased. "An 8 out of 10 for me," Nezu said. 10 out of 10. All Might judged. "Have to give credit to the Plus Ultra makeup." Kiba smiled from the side, taking a bit of pride in this. After all, it was her idea, and she had done all of the makeup and wig work. She had tried to get him to attach fake breasts, but Fu refused, even when she offered to pay more. "That gives you the same score as your sister." 27. Midnight said. "Makes sense, because you're just as cute." Fu grit his teeth, as he could hear Ken and Kyoko giggling in the audience, as he exited the stage. "Alright, next is Yami, dressed as the Grim Reaper," Nezu called. With that, Yami walked on stage, his red eyes staring into the souls of the judges. "It is quite a chilling design," Nezu admitted. "Even though it's a child, his appearance would make even a pro hero's skin crawl. It's like his eyes are drilling into me." Midnight shivered. "Very impressive. I think there are many villains who'd sell their soul to look half as terrifying as you, young Yami." All Might laughed. "Very good. Captures the Halloween spirit just right. Although honestly, I think the fake scythe brings it down a bit." Midnight said. "It just reminds me that it is in fact a costume." "Ah, I see what you're talking about." Nezu nodded. "If it was just the robe, your naturally terrifying self, then I could believe that you were some actual incarnation of the Grim Reaper. I can kind of see that," All Might said, taking a closer look at the scythe. "In that case, I would give it about an 8. Midnight said. "I personally would score it a 9, Nezu added. 9. All Might would have given it a 10, but he had a feeling that given all the splendid costumes tonight, he would have to heighten his standards, otherwise, everyone would get 10s. So that puts you at 26. Slightly lower than the other two, but still a very good score," Nezu told him. Yami shrugged. He only really participated because Amai suggested it. He wasn't too invested in how he did in the contest. And so he unceremoniously exited, making way for the next person. "Alright, next we have Amai, as Samus Aran," All Might announced. Amai eagerly ran onto the stage. This time she had her helmet on, and aimed her arm cannon around at invisible targets, to better show off her costume. "Very nice. Chibi little Samus." Midnight cooed. "Every detail is accounted for, a very convincing costume overall. However, it does have that plastic shine that makes it seem a bit fake." "Yes, that is indeed a problem," Nezu agreed. "It's a small detail, but it goes a long way in making it feel real. With that said, everything else is so great, that I think I'll only deduct 1 point. 9 out of 10. Midnight said. "I agree. 9 out of 10. Nezu said. Yes. 9 out of 10. All Might agree. And that brings your score up to a 27. tied for first place so far. Midnight told her. Amai felt a twinge of disappointment, but quickly shook it off, and bowed, "Thank you all for your time." And with that, she exited the stage. On to our next contestant, Fukinoko, as Link. Midnight called. And with that, they all waited, as Fuku slowly walked on stage, trembling slightly with fear and anxiety. "UMHI," Fuku said, trying her best not to give in to her fears and collapse on stage. "Hello dear," Midnight said with a sweet costume. "Won't you show off your costume for us?" Fuku was struggling to remember what to do when out of the corner of her eye she saw Shiraku gesturing for her to use her bow. Oh. Yes. Fuku took her bow, as well as an arrow from her quiver, then took aim at a nearby branch, striking a dynamic pose in the process. "Okay, Fuku, focus. Breath." Fuku took a deep breath and focused all her attention on her target. She felt the world around her fade away, until all there was the branch. Whip. Thunk. Fuku let loose her arrow, and it flew into the branch, lodging the arrow into the wood. "Oh my! Showing off a talent as well as her costume. Very nice," Midnight praised. "And it's a character-accurate skill, I'm gonna have to bump it up a point for that. Very impressive display. A bow a tricky thing to use, so to show such skill with it at such a young age is very admirable." All Might praised, giving her applause. "I agree wholeheartedly." Nezu nodded. "I think you have a future in Kudo." "Why you think so?" Fuku stuttered, blushing intensely at all the praise. "We know so dear," Midnight said, giving her a reassuring smile. "Now as for your ranking. To put it simply, your costume is utterly perfect. I can't find a single fault in it. Easily a 10 out 10. 9, Nezu added. The hair is a tad bit too long. I'll have to give it a 10. All Might said. I think the issue with the hair is so minor, in comparison to the character-accurate skill she just displayed. That brings you up to a 29. The highest score so far. You should be proud. Nezu told her. What? Fuku was shocked by how well she was doing tonight. First, she won the Jack-o'-lantern contest, and now she was getting at least second place here. Was she actually talented? Fuku's mind was blown, and she walked off stage while completely out of it. Alright, for our last contestant we have Shiraku, in an original costume. Midnight said. Shiraku scuttled on stage, spreading her arms and waving around her staff, and showing off her costume. Oh my, what a beautiful costume! Midnight praised. Such wonderful color work and design, and it fits your unique body so well. I can feel all the thought and hard work put into putting this together. Indeed. When it comes to hero costumes, it's quite easy to tell how much thought and heart was put into each one of them. Nezu said. And while this isn't a hero costume, the same applies here. Not to mention the originality. Coming up with something truly original is difficult in this day and age, but you pulled it off beautifully. And one advantage of coming up with something original is that you have full control over what the costume looks like. All Might added. Meaning we can't take away any points for character inaccuracy. Overall a truly splendid costume. 10 out 10. Midnight judged. Agreed. 10 out of 10. Nezu said. No complaints here. 10. All Might judged. And with that, you received a perfect 30. Making you the winner of the competition. Midnight applauded her, along with Nezu and All Might. Everyone else applauded her as well, including the other contestants. Alright, everyone. The party will continue for another hour, before coming to a close. Izuku announced. Enjoy. And as such, the children, 1A, and the teachers enjoyed the party, eating and talking away, into the night. Alright, just want to clarify again, the Halloween chapters are non-canon because of timeline reasons. Chapter 81, Interview. Seeing as it was now entirely too dangerous to go outside for a press conference, Izuku and DOC decided to have an interview. As such, Izuku and interviewer, Inata Byu, and her camera crew, all of whom had been background checked, so no risk of them trying to kill him. The two of them were sitting on the couches that Izuku added to his office, with a coffee table between them. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Midoriya. We know you're quite a busy person." Inata was clearly weirded out by interviewing someone of Izuku's age but was being as professional as possible. "Yes, my job has many benefits. But it is also full-time," Izuku said, putting on a forced smile. "So, not to be rude, but I would prefer to get to the questioning." "Of course," Inata said. "So, Mr. Midoriya, how did you come to start taking care of OPCs? You have to admit, taking care of children at your age is a peculiar decision." "Well, that information was actually classified for quite a bit of time," Izuku said. "However, after discussing it with some officials, we believe that we can safely share some information." "Really?" Inata asked, looking interested. "Please, do tell." "All right, so I had been at my house when suddenly I heard someone knocking on my door." Izuku started the story. "I open it, and there is a very scared-looking little girl. She was absolutely terrified. She said someone was chasing her and begged me not to let them get her. So naturally, I ushered her inside and closed the door. Of course, all that did was buy me a bit of time, before the villains broke into my house. Turns out, the villains she was getting chased by were the Yakuza." "The Yakuza?" Inata said, looking a bit surprised. "Yeah, them. Fortunately, I was able to act quickly. I hid the girl under a pile of laundry, not the most sanitary way of handling things, but I figured maybe they wouldn't check there, and then I got my phone, set it to record, and hid it, before I pretended to be asleep, using headphones to make it seem plausible that I slept through their break-in. That seems like a lot to think of in such little time," Inata pointed out. "Seems like you're a quick thinker. Wait. You recorded the Yakuza breaking into your house?" "That's right." Izuku nodded. "You might have heard about the story of the anonymous boy that took down the Yakuza. I was that boy." "Really?" Inata's eyes widened a bit. "Well, it's not like I took them down single-handedly," Izuku said quickly. Sir Night's agency had been investigating them for years. They just needed a bit more direct proof of wrongdoing to get the ball going. I was pretty much the straw that broke the camel's back. Still impressive nonetheless, Inata said. It was hard for Izuku to tell if she was just being formal or if that was genuine praise. "And then after that, you and the young girl were moved into witness protection, correct?" "That's right. We stayed together for a while, and got attached to each other," Izuku said. "So when I got the option to take her in, I did so." "And this girl was your first OPC?" Inata asked, getting a nod from Izuku. "Can I get her name and quirk by any chance?" "Well, I can give you her name, however, I think I should keep her quirk private. She's a shy girl, so sharing too much information about her feels wrong," Izuku told her. "That's fair." Inata agreed. "So her name?" "It's Eri," Izuku answered. "Eri? Why was the Yakuza after her in the first place?" Inata asked. You see, Eri is the granddaughter of the former boss of the Yakuza before Kai Chizaki, aka Overhaul, took over, Izuku explained. So after the old boss fell ill, Chizaki decided to take care of his granddaughter out of respect. Unfortunately, Chizaki was a piece of literal human garbage, and was horrible abusive towards her, inflicting punishments that border on torture if she even thought of disobeying him. Even frequently using his quirk on her, in effect, killing her and then bringing her back multiple times using his quirk. Oh god. Izuku could tell Inata looked genuinely disgusted by that. What a monster. I am aware. Trust me. Izuku grimaced as he recalled reading Chizaki's experiment notes and documents. But moving on with the story, that was only the first OPC I happened to bump into. First? You just happened to bump into 2 OPCs by accident? Inata asked. More than 2, but we'll get there, Izuku said. One day I went shopping with Diri. I found that many of the shoppers had been turned to stone. As it turns out, a villain had abducted a homeless OPC child and was using her as a weapon to rob places. Fortunately, I managed to knock him unconscious with a tranquilizer dart, and save the child. And then you ran into another after that? Inata looked confused. That seems very unlikely. Extremely. Izuku agreed. I thought the same thing, especially when I ran into 2 more not too long after that, and then another one not long after that. Are you serious? Inata looked at him in disbelief. Absolutely, Izuku said, his face and tone showing that he was in fact dead serious. I'm aware it's insane sounding, but it is what happened. The kids started making jokes that I had a secret quirk that attracted OPCs. I can understand what that. I don't even have words. Inata, responding. Yeah, well, seeing as I'd done a good job of taking care of so many of OPCs and was seemingly willing to adopt them to no end, they gave me an offer. Izuku continued. They wanted me to start this foundation, and accept every OPC they had. They gave me a contract that told me that they would be funding my foundation, as well as building a facility for me and my children, and providing other measures of support, and I would do this job for the rest of my life. The rest of your life? Inata questioned. You mean you could never quit? Or stop accepting OPCs? That's right, Izuku confirmed. And you agreed to that? Inata asked, getting a nod from Izuku. Isn't that a bit reckless? As you said, this is a job that comes with a 24-hour work period, doesn't that essentially lock you off from any other jobs? Didn't you have something in mind? A dream job or something? Izuku sighed. I did have a dream job once. I wanted to be a hero. Inata didn't say anything, but her wide eyes and befuddled look told him what she thought of that. It was my dream since I was a child. Izuku continued. I always thought that saving people was the coolest thing you could do. I admired heroes, obsessed over them even. I'm pretty sure there is no piece of All Might merchandise I don't either have, or know about. I thought there was nothing that would stop me from chasing the dream. And then I was diagnosed as quirkless. That must have been devastating, Inata said, with a bit of sympathy. It was, Izuku said in a low voice. I still held on to my dream. But everyone else stopped believing in me. It's also when my life started going downhill. My father abandoned us, my friends turned their backs on me, and the schools were actively against me. We'd heard about the quirkist abuse you suffered at the hands of your schools, Inata said. We don't mean to bring up any bad memories, but could you elaborate on the way you were treated? There's not much to say really. They essentially did everything they could to make my life harder, Izuku said. Lowering my grades, blaming me for things other kids did, turning their heads when they saw me getting mistreated or assaulted, and if ever tried to defend myself, then I would always be blamed for whatever happened. It was terrible. Even worse was the way they made me believe that deserved it. That I was really a lesser person just because I didn't have a quirk. Do you still believe that? Inata asked. It's hard not to, Izuku admitted. I developed a persecution complex. I just tend to blame myself whenever something goes wrong, and it's really, really difficult not to do that. It's also made accepting praise from others difficult, and has left me a lingering sense of paranoia. Have you sought mental help for your issues? Inata asked. Izuku sighed again. Not yet, I should have, but I've been very busy so I never found the time. I will get to it eventually, once I've hired more staff. But I believe we were discussing my dream, correct? That's right. Inata nodded. When exactly did you give up on that dream? I imagine it must have been hard to foster such a difficult dream with no one believing in you. You're correct, Izuku said. I held on to that dream for years, despite what everyone else said, until one day I met a high-ranking pro hero. And I asked them if I could become a pro hero. They said no. That's a rather divisive statement, Hinata said. Care to share who that hero was? Izuku shook his head. As you said, that statement could be very divisive, and I don't want to cause that hero trouble. They said that not because of any bias against quirkless people, but because they were concerned for my safety. Which I appreciate, even if it was absolutely devastating. Was this before or after you ran into Eri? Hinata asked. Before. Izuku clarified. And so this left me with this feeling of hopelessness and a lack of purpose. For my entire life I'd clung to this dream, and so when that dream was gone there was just a void in me. And then I met Eri, and I started taking care of her, and it felt like that void where my dream once was being filled, seeing her grow and becoming happier as time went on. And that feeling only grew as I got more kids. So did you dream of becoming a hero, and lack of direction in life influenced your decision to start this foundation? Hinata asked. Yes, very much. Izuku nodded. I always wanted to help people, and this was a form of helping people. Just in a different form than what I originally wanted. These children needed love and affection, and I could give it to them. And me not having anything else I wanted to do, helped in the decision to sign. So you don't regret signing at all? Hinata asked. No, Izuku answered immediately. No matter what downsides this job has, it's offset by seeing how happy those kids are. Nothing can be that. Then I suppose the next question is, do you think you are qualified for this job? Hinata asked. Because there are many people how capable a 15-year-old is for this position. Well, I can't blame them, Izuku said. But at the same time, I think the results speak for themselves. All the children are happy and healthy. And nothing had really gone wrong, with the exception of my crash, and I've been taking measures to make sure that doesn't happen again. And I imagine keeping things up and running is a rather difficult task, Hinata said. How much goes into keeping this foundation running? Well, there's a lot. Managing repairs for the forest and the house, which need to happen frequently because the kids often break things, and then I have to make lesson plans for both their formal education, their quirk training, and helping them learn their respective hobbies and future job prospects. I also need to manage the supplies of this place, such as food, school supplies, special support items, and more. And of course, you need to spend time with and support the children personally, making sure they get the amount of attention they need. That's quite a lot of work, Hinata commented. And it's only scratching the surface, Izuku said. As I said, the job never really ends. Which is why I say the results speak for themselves. I can't argue with that. Hinata agreed. Now, another topic I wanted to cover was the process of OPCs being brought here, and how it's handled. Firstly, say a parent wants to get rid of their OPC child, how does one do that? Well, first you have to get in contact with DOC, you can find the number online. And when you call them, you tell them that you think your child is an OPC and they send people to check if that is actually the case. If they label the child an OPC, they'll take them to one of the DOC facilities, where they'll be put into a list, to wait for their turn to be transferred here, into my care. Izuku explained. Okay, so when you obtain these children, are they legally your children, or are they still adoptable? Hinata asked. Well, I'm not listed as their father, only their legal guardian. Izuku clarified. This decision was made because I'm aware that not all of the kids would be comfortable thinking of me as their father, nor would they appreciate having that thrust upon them. If they want to think of me as a father, then they can, or they can think of me as a brother or a friend. Or anything really. As for adoptability, for the most part, you can't adopt an OPC. The only way you could adopt one is via my approval, and I would only approve of that if the child genuinely unhappy in my care or would be happier in the care of the adopter, and even then I would demand very thorough background checks, inspection of their homes, and they would have to go through a year-long trial period before I would allow them to fully adopt the child. Those are some strict conditions, Inata noted. They have to be, Izuku told her. There are people who exploit OPCs for power. As I told you, there was a villain who used one of my daughters as a weapon to commit crimes. Not to mention adopting an OPC comes with a check to deal with their needs, as well compensate you for risking your life by raising them. People have adopted OPCs in the past, purely for this reason, and neglected the actual child. This kind of behavior cannot be allowed. This is why my process has to take so long and be as thorough as it is. That makes sense, Inata said. Now, I think it's time we address the elephant in the room, the assassination attempt. Izuku frowned. Well, I don't really have much to say on that. We don't know who sent the assassin, however, judging from what we do know, the motive behind their attacks seems to be quirkish. Of course, we are taking precautions to increase security, as you may have seen. Yes, those. What are they called? Inata asked. Grim, Izuku answered. Yes, those Grim. Those were created by one of the children here, as was your robe, correct? Inata asked. That's right. My son Yami. Izuku told her. He had been, understandably worried about my lack of protection. He used his quirk to make the Grim seen around the house as guards, as well as to serve other functions, like carrying heavy objects. One of those Grim, made in cooperation with my daughter Shiraku, was this robe. Made to keep me safe should danger ever come to me. Right, and those things aren't actually alive, right? Inata asked, looking slightly disturbed. No. The Grim are pretty much robots made of solidified negative emotions. Izuku explained. They may mimic living beings, and share many of the same functions, but they have no actual will or minds of their own. That must be rather handy, Inata commented. Tell me, are the children living here comfortable with those things around? Mostly, Izuku answered. Many of them were rather off-put by them at first, but considering that they are also given control of them, they got over pretty fast. And while there are one or two of them that are still uncomfortable around them, I make it pretty easy to avoid them if you really want to. I see one last question. Does producing those Grim cause any negative effects on the boy? Inata asked. No. Izuku shook his head. Yami's quirk has no immediate drawbacks. Its only weakness is that it requires him to absorb negative emotions as fuel. Without those, he can't make any more Grim. Other than that, he can make as many as he pleases with no drawbacks. I see, what a powerful quirk, Inata commented. Tell me, have any of the children considered becoming heroes in the future? Many of them have, yes, Izuku affirmed. As you know, this place holds children with extremely potent quirks, so it makes sense that many of them would wish to use that power to defend others. I have a room designed for the children to train their quirks, with specialized equipment suited for them. Of course, I have to keep close watch of them while they train, to make sure they don't go too far while sparing. Of course, they're not under any pressure to go down the hero track, and they're free to choose any profession they wish. Well, next I would like to talk about funding, Inata said. Surely this place must cost a fortune to maintain, not even counting the surrounding area. Is this all paid for by DOC directly, or is DOC paying you to deal with this? DOC paid for the construction of the house and purchase of the land, Izuku explained. However, all other expenses must be handled by me, although they do pay me enough to handle it. Although I do receive money from other sources as well. Other sources? Inata questioned. Such as various places. My mother will send in quite a bit of money. I've also gotten into investing as well, which pulls in a ton of money as well. And how do I say this? Sometimes, due to the children's unique quirks, they can produce materials that can then be sold. With no harm done to the child, of course. Izuku quickly clarified. For example, one of my daughters can produce spider webs and likes to design clothing. Really good, high-quality clothing, by the way, but regardless, she likes to produce them using her webs. This, of course, means that she'll have a lot of extra pieces of discarded webbing that she throws away. Spider webs can of course be sold in high quantities, for quite a bit of money. Of course, I ask permission first before doing such things, and any profit that the children help generate will go into their allowances. And things like Kiba's donations that she gets from her streams, goes directly to her, as I had no part in obtaining that money. I mean, I'd argue you did, considering you purchased the equipment she used to get that money, the room she sleeps in, and the food she eats. Hinata retorted. I suppose you could look at it that way. Izuku acknowledged. Still, Kiba worked to obtain that money, unlike the other children whose quirks just happen to produce valuable things. I would feel wrong in taking any of it. I see, but I must ask, if the government is providing you with all that money, why look for other avenues to gain income? Hinata asked. Are they not providing enough? No, they're providing more than enough money, Izuku assured her. However, I feel uncomfortable with only a single source of income. As you stated, it keeps a ridiculous amount of money to keep this place up and running. Taking care of this many children, with quirks these dangerous, means that being rich is a requirement. If I didn't have all these other sources of income, and something happened that would cause the government to stop giving us money, then at most this place would last 2 weeks before the children no longer had anything to eat, and that's assuming this place would still be left standing, as I would no longer have money to constantly repair it. And no ordinary job would ever allow me to make enough money to take care of them, while also being able to watch over them. So now, with all these other sources of income, if the government were to stop giving you money, would you be alright financial speaking? Hinata asked. Izuku leaned back and let out a breath. Well, I would definitely have cut down on any frivolous spending I do. As well as a lot of frivolous spending for the kids. We'd have enough money to keep going, but that'd be about it. Despite the fact that we'd have enough money to be considered rich, for the most part, we'd have to act as if we didn't have a lot of money. This is why I am still currently searching for more ways to obtain income. Have you given any thought to donations? Hinata asked. Izuku nodded. I have, but I'm not really to ask for any. Right now I'm still living quite wealthily, so it feels wrong to ask people for their money. Of course, if they are willing to donate, I won't refuse, and all money donated will be put into an emergency fund, used only for, well, emergencies. I see. Hinata looked up at the clock. Well, I think we should start wrapping this up. Yes, I think that would be wise, Izuku nodded. Are there any final questions? Do you have a favorite child? Hinata asked. Izuku laughed. Absolutely not. Chapter 82, 9. A young woman looked at the forest in front of her, smiling eagerly, with a dangerous look in her eyes. The woman looked like an Olympic athlete, with black shorts, a black sports bra covering a body that looked like it was made of pure muscle. Her most notable traits, however, were her cat-like attributes, those being her black tail, and black cat ears on top of her black hair, which was styled into a ponytail. All right. I finally found it. Who knew all I had to do was look online? The woman said in a gruff but somehow at the same time bubbly voice. Well, can't waste any more time. Let's go. And with that, the woman got down on all fours and leapt into the woods at astonishing speeds, completely missing the sign that said not to enter, lest intruders get attacked. Meanwhile, in Izuku's office, Izuku was looking through some papers, when suddenly the nearby seer went up to him. Izuku turned his attention to the seer. The seer then displayed an image of a cat-quirked woman, running through the forest at high speeds, so much so that the seer that was watching her couldn't keep up, and she ran out of sight. An intruder? Izuku's eyes widened in alarm before a serious expression overtook him. What could she want? Could this be another assassin? Well, let's hope that our security system works as well as it did last time. As the woman ran through the forest on all fours, she heard something with her incredibly keen sense of hearing. Footsteps. Animal footsteps, and a lot of them, closing on her. Actually, she could also faintly hear something below her, and something flying through the air, both in between the trees and up in the sky. She looked to the side and saw a hint of the Sabiras that were fast approaching her. Oh. Those are what they called. Those shadow monsters. The woman looked frustrated, as for whatever reason she couldn't remember the name of these monsters, before figuratively shrugging it off. Ah, who cares? The real question is, why are they chasing me? Oh. This must be a test. I know what to do here. The woman then pounced to the side, jumping on top of Sabira, and biting into its neck, her feline teeth ripping apart its flesh with ease, and killing it swiftly. The other sabers that were following suddenly stopped, before turning around, and running away. They're running away? The woman tilted her head in confusion. Why? Suddenly a fleet griffin leaped down, intent on landing on the woman and holding her down. Only for the woman to backflip onto the closest one's back, and bite into its neck, killing it as well, before landing on the ground. She then quickly turned and jumped up, her nails turning into sharp claws that tore into the sides of the griffons, as she used the griffons as footstools to reach the rest of them, and sliced through them with her claws. After cutting through about a dozen of them, she finally reached the final one and slashed its neck, killing it. Of course, now this meant she was plummeting to the ground, but she didn't seem too concerned. Once she got enough, she sunk her claws into the closest tree, which slowed her fall as she slid back to the forest floor, her claws leaving deep marks in the tree as she fell. The woman landed on her feet and took her claws out of the tree. Then, she heard something tunneling out of the ground around her, and creeps crawled out of the dirt around her, surrounding her completely. The woman smiled, and readied her claws, before jumping forward. She grabbed the creep by the mouth, and using her momentum, she flips it upside down and then slashes its exposed underside apart. They never stood a chance. Izuku watched as the woman tore apart the level 1 Grim with ease. Like a tiger ripping apart rabbits. Alright, seems this is going to be an issue. He considered just skipping security level 2 and heading to level 3. After all, it seems like this woman was rather tough, and was approaching rather quickly. Well, it'll take some time for the level 3 Grim to approach, Izuku said to himself, before speaking into the seer. Send the level 2 Grim. And get a level 3 Grim ready for deployment. The woman was once again running on all fours towards the house when she heard more enemies coming towards her. Then, in front of her came a swarm of Ravagers, screaming at her. Ow! The woman winced as the sound hit her ears, causing her to fold them down. She grit her teeth in anger, and bared her teeth at the swarm, ready to tear them apart. She jumped into the swarm, claws out, and slashed at the area around her, tearing apart dozens of the bat-like Grim, before doing it again and tearing apart another dozen. The Ravagers all came at her, attempting to swarm her, and bit and slash into her flesh, but she tore them apart with her claws so easily and with such speed, that it became difficult for them to get close, and any that did, she grabbed with her mouth, before biting down on them with her fangs, crushing them in her jaw. All in all, the swarm only held her in place for a few minutes, and didn't get more than a couple of scratches and before they went down. Once the swarm had been dealt with, the woman proceeded to keep going on, running. She ran forward into a clearing, where she found 5 Boar-Ba-Tusk and a pack of 10 Beowulfs coming at her. The Boar-Ba-Tusks were rolling towards her Sonic the Hedgehog style and approaching her quickly. She just grinned and charged forward even faster. Then just as the two were about to collide, she reached forward, grabbed its tusks, and jumped, leaping upwards and taking the Boar-Ba-Tusk with her, flipping in the air, and turning the Boar-Ba-Tusk over, before slamming it down onto its back as she landed. She then slashed its exposed underbelly open, killing it as the other boar tusks rolled past. The other 4 boar tusks stopped, uncurling before charging at her. However, the woman was much faster, and she rushed past them, sinking her claws in the small lines of unguarded fur on their back, and making deep slashes in them as she ran past, killing 2 more of them. She then ran over to one of the other boar tusks and lunged forward, and thrust her claws into its side, nearly impaling the monster, killing it with ease, before running over to the last one, and kicking it over, and sinking her claws into its exposed underside. With the boar tusk dealt with, that only left the wolf pack, which was quickly approaching them. But they were absolutely no issue for her at all, as the woman charged forward at alarming speeds, and expertly slicing through the throats of the wolf Grim as she ran through the pack until she was behind them. In about 5 seconds, she murdered the entire pack. Then, 2 more Grim came into the clearing, Ursus to be specific. The 2 bear Grim approached the woman, standing up on their hind legs and getting ready to slash at her, only for her to slash open their throats in a second. With those 2 dead, the woman was about to get going. 3 King Tajida came in from all around her. The one in front of her charged at her with its black head, with its fangs bared. The woman jumped over its attack and landed on its head, and just went to town, slashing away at the back of its head, until it went limp. The white head hissed in pain and went to bite the woman, only for her to kick its slower jaw, deflecting it upwards, and giving her access to its neck, which she promptly tore into, killing it. 1 down, 2 more to go. I have definitely underestimated this woman. Izuku thought nervously as he watched her tear him, Grim, apart. She's definitely some kind of assassin. The way she kills these Grim, tearing into their necks and heads. She's like a super predator. Actually, given her quirk, that makes sense. Still, I need to get serious. Switch to level 3 security, Izuku told the seer, just as Okako burst into his office. Izuku, what's going on? The seers just showed us someone running through the forest. Okako said with an extremely concerned expression. We have an intruder, Izuku told her urgently. Tell all of your classmates and my mother, and get all the kids inside. On it. Okako said, turning around and running back out of the room. With Okako gone, Izuku turned back to the seer. After disposing of a few more Grim along the way, the woman continued on her path through the forest. Then she heard 2 attacks coming towards her from above. Then 2 fireballs hit the ground behind her, exploding and singeing the ground. She stopped running, and 2 manticores dropped out of the sky right in front of her. The manticores quickly opened fire, shooting out fireballs at the woman, who dodged them all with ease, jumping and flipping from side to side, elegantly yet ferociously avoiding every attack. She then charged forward, ducking under one of the manticore, and then thrusting her arm up through its jaw, impaling its head with her hand. As the Grim died and faded away, the other one started to shoot at her again. The woman then jumped up, before diving down and axe-kicking the manticore's head, caving in its skull with her heel, killing it. The bone wasn't as tough as I thought, the woman said as she got her feet. She then heard the sound of something large coming towards her, on her right. Then 2 Brinjals came charging out of the tree line and were coming right at her. One charged at her, before jumping up, bringing its arms up intent on smashing her into the ground. However, the woman simply jumped up towards the Brinjal and slashed its throat open. The Brinjal fell to the ground, slumping over before dissipating into smoke, as the woman landed on her feet, and ran at other Brinjal. She got real close to it, and before it could react, she jumped up, flipping on its neck, before slashing this one's neck as well, killing it. The woman jumped off the dying Grim, once again, gracefully landing on her feet. Wow, this is a great workout, the woman said cheerfully, as she wiped some sweat off her forehead. What a fun test. After taking a minute to stretch, she got back on all fours and started running. Eventually, the woman made her way to another clearing. However, this was a dead end, as she was faced with a steep cliffside. The woman stared at the cliffside for a moment. I wonder before she could finish her thoughts, she heard something beneath her. She jumped back, as a blind worm shot out of the ground. Rat! The bling worm screamed at her, before burying itself back into the ground. She could barely hear it, tunneling under her, coming towards her. Its predictability would be its downfall. When she heard it start coming back up, she jumped back a bit, dodging as it burst out of the ground. Then she quickly jumped at it, digging her claws into its exposed belly, and tearing a hole in its flesh open, that was big enough for her to crawl inside, which she did. Rag! The blind worm thrashed about in pain, as it felt the woman tear up its insides, until eventually, it flopped onto the ground, and turned into smoke, eventually releasing the woman. Huh, wasn't as bad as I thought. The woman said, as all the grim guts dissipated off her. Thought that would be grosser. As she dusted herself off, she looked back at the cliff. I wonder if I can once again. Her thought was interrupted, as she heard something coming towards her, something really big, and something really slow. It would likely take whatever that was a few minutes to get towards her, and she could easily avoid it. But where was the fun in that? Instead, she decided to take a bit of a break, catch her breath, do some stretches. She had no idea how long this test would be, so it was important to pace herself. And so after a few minutes of rest, it came. The Goliath. Oh, you are a big boy. The woman licked her lips in anticipation. Let's go. The Goliath charged at her, at the same time the woman also charged at it. She jumped up onto its back, turned around, and went to slash at the back of its neck. Since it was thick, it took a lot of slashes, but since the Goliath was so slow and heavy, it's not like it had any way to get her off its back, so all it could do was scream in pain and run around, as the woman's claws dug into it. After half a minute, she managed to do enough damage to kill the thing, causing it to collapse and dissipate. Wow, that thing's skin was pretty tough, the woman said, before turning back to the cliff. All right, let's go. The woman then ran up to the cliff, and jumped onto the side, embedding her claws into the rock, before climbing up the cliff. After getting to another clearing, the woman sat down behind a rock. Phew. Man, this forest is big. She sat down for a bit, resting her feet after all that running and fighting, before looking towards the forest. Hey, you've been following me for a while. Do you want to fight or something? There was a short pause, before suddenly she used her hands to push herself up into the air, dodging an invisible slash attack that created 4 claw marks in the rock behind her. The woman landed on the rock, grinning down at her invisible attacker. Ha! Nice try. But I can hear you. It was then that the hound made itself visible, standing on all fours, and glaring upwards at her. Then, the woman jumped up and went to dive kick the thing in the head, but the hound jumped back, avoiding the attack. The hound then changed its form, standing upright, before reeling its arm back, and then shooting it forward, its arm extending like one of Kyozai's tendrils. The woman then ducked under its stretchy arm, and slashed it apart, as she ran towards the hound. She got up close to the creature and was about to slash at its neck when suddenly, a thick piece of armor grew there. Of course, she slashed at it anyway. However, the armor proved to be too tough, and while she did leave a few claw marks, it was nothing too deep. The hound then swung its head down, intent on taking a bite out of her shoulder. She dropped to the floor to avoid the bite, and then rolled over to the side, before jumping back onto her feet. There she saw that the claw marks she left in the hound's armored neck was healing rapidly until was good as new. Oh, this thing is gonna be tough. The woman smirked, before getting into an offensive stance. Alright, let's test the limits of your healing, shall we? Whoosh. The woman dashed forward, going much faster than she had been before, meaning she wasn't holding back. In a flash, she ran past the hound, slashing its chest, before quickly circling around, running back, and slashing it again, before turning back around, and running back at it. this time slashing its back. The woman ran circles around the hound, slashing up its body heavily. However, the hound seemed mostly unaffected, despite taking massive injuries, although these injuries didn't last long, as it regenerated very quickly. Seeing as her opponent seemed mostly unaffected by her attacks, she decided it was time to go for a fatal blow. She jumped back, before doing some backflips away from the hound, before getting into a pouncing stance, and then launching herself at the Grim with explosive power. Shink. She thrust her arm right through its heart, impaling him like a spear. And the hound looked about as unaffected by this as it did by the rest of her attacks. In fact, this attack would prove to be a huge error, as the woman felt the hound's body hardened, both inside and out, as more armor formed around her arm, locking it in place. "Oh shit," the woman said, realizing that this mistake, as she tried to pull her arm out, to no avail. "Shit, shit, shit, shit." The hound raised it up, its arms ready to attack the woman. However, she used her other arm, to quickly cut both its arm off. She then jumped up, getting her feet onto its chest, as she tried to force her arm out of its chest. And after some pushing, she finally managed to dislodge her arm from the monster. She fell to the ground, backflipping away from the monster once more. Alright. So attacking its body is no good. No matter how fast I attack it, it'll just keep regenerating. But it has to have a weakness. Let's try its head. The hound grew its back, its arms, and in fact, it grew some more arms as well, 2 more to be precise, right in its chest. All 4 arms shot out, extending to try and catch the woman in her claws. The woman shot forward, ducking under one of the arms, and slashing it, before ducking to the left to dodge another one, and then jumping up to dodge the 3rd arm, before kicking away the last arm that came for her midair. She dived down at the hound with her claws pointed at its head. The hound jumped back to avoid her. However, the woman simply lunged forward at it, and landed on its chest, while grabbing its head. She then dug her claws into the side of its neck and started trying to pull its head off. Meanwhile, the hound's 4 extended arms grew back, and turned around, before rocketing towards the woman that was ripping his head off. Grrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr Then with one final pull, she ripped its head off. Fortunately, after this happened, the hound's body went limp and started to fade into smoke. That's not to say the hound was dead, its head was still very much alive, and, snarling the woman. The woman saw that it was quickly growing back its body. If she left it alone, he'd probably fully heal back its body in a minute or two. Not that she'd let it. She immediately dropped his head to the ground, and stepped on it, slowly crushing its skull, until splat. She crushed its head, and the brain that was inside. Mew. The woman said as realized she got child brain, all over her foot. As she wiped the brains of a 7-year-old boy off her foot and onto the grass, a seer watched her from the shadows. Okay, so she defeated a hound. Crap. Alright. No more holding back. Izuku said to the seer. She wants a fight. Then she'll get one. Initiate security level 4, and get the other 2 hounds. He would not have his family threatened. Even if he had to unleash hell on this woman. Hopefully, she'd survive at the very least. Now, who is this mysterious Neko lady? And what does she want? Chapter 83, Feline Frenzy. After all that traveling and fighting, the intruder was quite thirsty. Thankfully, she was able to sniff out a nearby lake, which she then booked it to immediately. Once she reached the edge of the lake, she dunked her head in the water and started drinking up for a few seconds, before taking her head back out. She then got up and started to shake her head around, flinging the water off her face and hair. That's good water. Fresh and clean. With her thirst quenched, she got up and turned around, ready to start traveling again. And then she heard something begin to surface from out of the water. Oh? The woman turned back, towards the water. Now what's this? Then, The sea Fialong broke through the surface of the water. The massive serpentine dragon turned its head towards the woman, who was standing at the edge of the lake, a good distance away from it. "Hell yeah! I'm fighting a dragon." The woman grinned and got into a pouncing stance. "Alright. Let's go." Unfortunately for her, the Fialong had no intention of getting close. Instead it charged up an electricity blast, and shot out its laser at her from a distance. "Oh shit," the woman said, as she quickly jumped to the side, when she saw the attack coming, the laser whizzing past her, and destroying all the trees behind her, leaving many of them singed and burned. She looked at the damage that beam did to the trees with wide eyes, before looking back at the Fialong, already charging up another beam. "That is so cool. Also super deadly," the woman commented. "Alright, so this fight is gonna be on the water. Well, that's kind of annoying." She ducked down, avoiding another beam that flew over her head. "But if it's what I got to do." The woman then ran onto the surface of the water, and ran atop it. Despite what many people thought, you didn't need to have All Might level speeds to run on water. You don't. You only really needed to be a fraction of that speed to accomplish this feat. Even still, the speeds needed to accomplish this were outside of what a normal human could accomplish, and even for this incredibly fast intruder, she needed to make sure she ran at top speed and didn't stop moving. The woman ran towards the Fialong, quickly approaching the draconic sea monster. Curiously, the Fialong stopped charging its beam, and instead, it swerved around and tried to swipe at her with its tail. The woman jumped up, barely managing to dodge the attack, but as its tail went by, she grabbed onto it with one of her arms, and hung on. The Fialong noticed this and flailed its tail around in the air wildly, trying to shake her off, but the woman held on tight and crawled her way up the tail fin. "Ugh. Think I'm gonna hurl," the woman said as the high winds hit her face. She continued to crawl up its tail fin and onto its body, using her claws to make her way up the monster, towards its head. The Fialong was decidedly happy about this and decided to do something about it, by diving underwater. "Uh-oh," the woman thought as she realized she was going into the lake. She took a deep breath, as she and the Fialong submerged. From there on, crawling up the monster was even harder, as it swam around at high speeds, and the woman could feel the water pushing against her, like gravity fighting against her body. She had to really embed her claws into the beast to keep herself from falling off it. Not to mention, she had to do all this while holding her breath. Man, this is some test. The woman thought as she climbed, now reaching the middle of the monster's serpentine body. The Fialong swam down to the bottom of the lake before making a U-turn upwards, swimming rapidly towards the surface. Phosh! The Fialong shot out of the water and into the air, bringing the woman along with it. This did cause the woman to stagger a bit, but she held on tight, and since she was no longer underwater for the moment, she finally got the chance to breathe. However, this wouldn't last, as the Fialong turned its body around once more, facing its head towards the water, as gravity effect, and it fell back into the water with a loud splash. After a few more minutes she finally made her way to the back of its head. She raised one of her claws up and tried to stab its head through its mask. However, this failed, and she only created a scratch. No good. It's harder to hit things while underwater. Especially when the water is pushing against me. The woman thought. I need to get rid of the armor. She kicked off her shoes, allowing them to get lost in the lake, and unleashed the claws on her toes, digging them into the side of the monster, to make sure she didn't fall off. Then she dug her nails underneath the mask and pushed upwards with all her strength. Rag! The beast roared as it felt its mask getting pulled off its face. It wasn't an easy task for the woman. It was like trying to rip a nail off of a person's finger, but 1,000 times harder, and she had to do it while holding her breath. Despite this, she could feel it coming off, as the flesh connecting the bone mask to its head snapped off and she slowly erased the bone off its face. It was hellish, trying to do something strenuous, while not being able to breathe. but with one final push, she lifted its mask off its face. Rag! The Fialong roared in agony, as its mask fell to the lake bed, and its black blood started spewing everywhere. The woman then crawled up to the center of its head and plunged her claws through its skull. Roaring! The Fialong gave one last roar of agony before its body relaxed, and it began to fade away. As the Fialong died, the woman raised her arms out and tried to let out a celebratory shout, only for water to rush in her mouth, as she quickly realized that she was still underwater, and now she would need to get some air before she died. She panicky swam upwards, going as fast as she could. The woman broke the surface, and quickly spat out the water that had entered her mouth, and breathed in as much air as she could. After getting in enough air, she swam to land, crawling up out of the water, laid down on the grass, and looked up at the sky. God, I hate fighting in water. Thump. Thump, thump. It was then that two Geist, in stone golem bodies came out, looking for trouble. Oh! The intruder groaned as she got back onto her feet. Couldn't you give me a minute? Izuku watched as the intruder fought the Geists. They didn't stand a chance, but at the very least, they could distract her long enough for the heroes to get here. He'd called the police as soon as she got past level 3 security, but he had no idea when they would get here. All he could do right now is hope that either level 4 security would handle her, or the heroes would. Okiko ran into the room. All the kids are inside. What's the situation? She just defeated a Fialong and two Geists, and she'll be approaching the house in about 20 minutes. Izuku told her. She's really strong. I don't think anyone in your class could beat her. Not even you. Okiko bit her lip. We'll see about that. If it comes down to it. Hopefully it won't, Izuku said sternly. She's back on the move, but she's approaching the Nukulevi. Let's see how she deals with this. The woman was running through the forest when she made it to another clearing. However, it wasn't quite clear, because standing in the center of it was the Nukulevi. The rider hunched over on its horse until it heard the woman come, and then it changed its posture, its bones giving off a chilling crunching sound with each movement. Oh, scary, the woman said, not looking intimidated at all by its nightmarish appearance. Roar! The Nukulevi let out an ear-piercing scream that caused the woman to recoil in pain and cover her ears. The woman howled in pain, as the beast's roar caused her immense pain, and kept her rooted in place for a second. The monster then shot out its stretchy arm at her, punching her with great force. AGH. The woman cried out in pain as she was punched in the stomach, getting the wind knocked out of her, and sending her flying through 4 trees. She landed on her back, as she struggled to breathe. The Nukulevi charged towards her, intent on running her over with its horse. Despite still struggling to breathe, the woman was able to jump out of the way, as the horse charged past her. As the Nukulevi stopped its charge so it could turn around, the woman finally caught her breath and got back up to her feet. Alright. Time to kill this thing, the woman decided. Meanwhile, the Nukulevi had turned and shot out its arm at her again. However, this time she was ready, and dodged the attack, and slashed at its stretchy limb. Boing! However, the attack did very little, as instead of cutting through his slim, and seemingly fragile arm, the arm just moved with her claw, as she plucked at it like a guitar string. The arm reeled back, and the Nukulevi shot out its other arm at her, which she promptly dodged by jumping onto the side of a tree. She then jumped to the next tree, and the next tree, jumping from tree to tree at astonishing speeds. The woman jumped through the trees around the Nukulevi, confusing it as it kept turning its head to try and see where its target was, but she was simply too fast. Slice! Before it even knew what happened, it was attacked from behind, the woman striking the back of its neck with her claws, intent on taking its head off. However, its neck was tougher than anticipated, so rather than taking its head clean off, it just made a deep gash in the back of its neck. The woman then flipped midair, before landing on her feet, and then pouncing back towards a tree, before going back to jumping from tree to tree, seeing as it couldn't keep track of his opponent at all, and if she landed another attack like that she'd kill it. The Nukalavee needed to do something. And so it did, spinning around while extending its arms, knocking down all the trees around it. The woman jumped into the air from the tree she was in, just as it was going down. Nukalavee stopped spinning and then launched its arm at her. Being unable to dodge while in the air, the woman simply kicked the hand away, deflecting the attack, allowing her to land safely on the ground. Once Nukalavee retracted its arm, it then extended them back out to both sides and spun around. The woman ducked under the spinning arms, running low to the ground on all fours. She then quickly ran onto the horse's leg and crawled up it before it could do anything until she was latched onto the side of the horse, looking right at the rider's rotating waist. The woman then latched her claws into the rider's waist, and since it was rotating, her claw was being dragged across its waist, injuring the beast as her claws tore it up, and dug deeper into it. Seeing as it was hurting itself, the Nukalavee stopped spinning, but before it could do anything about the woman latched to its waist, she jumped up, now hanging off its shoulders, with her claw raised up to its neck. Slash! 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 And like a lumberjack chopping away at a tree, the woman slashed away at the Nukalavee's neck, until it was severed, and his head came off. Like all the other Grimm, its body went limp, the horse's legs collapsing and the light going out in its eyes, as it started to fade away. The woman jumped off of the fading monster, not even taking the time to wait for the monster to fade, before going back on the run. Momo walked into Izuku's office and saw him and Okiko staring into the seer. The kids are starting to get anxious. Is she down yet? No, Izuku said just as nervously. She's fighting the sulfur fish right now. Oh, one just got a hit in on her. Oh fuck. Oh shit. Oh, fuck. Momo heard the woman yell, causing her to wince slightly. The sulfur fish is something that she wouldn't sick on her worst enemy, but she was rooting for them to at least weaken the woman. Will those defeat her? Momo asked. Absolutely not. She's already taken out about 100 of them, Izuku said. But given how many there are, it's gonna take her a while. This should hold her long enough for the other Grimm to get close. The hound should be approaching the house now, and the wyvern is approaching her location. Can any of them defeat her? Momo asked. Maybe, Izuku said. She should be getting tired by now. Class B couldn't even get past level 3 security, and there were 20 of them. Momo thought aloud. And this woman is fighting level 4, Grimm by herself. These are the kinds of enemies we'll have to fight one day. We have so far to go. Well, we'll have to get ready quick, Okiko said, giving Momo a determined look. If she gets past the hounds, then it'll be up to us to defend the kids. No, Izuku said simply. What? Okiko quickly turned her head to Izuku, giving him a bewildered look. You'd all die. Or at the very least, most of you would. Izuku told her, his fist clenching. I can't send you out there when we have a better option. What better option? Okiko asked. Izuku stayed quiet for a moment, looking conflicted. I hope it doesn't come to this, but there is one, almost surefire way of defeating her, but if it doesn't work, I hope it doesn't come to that. Okiko and Momo looked at each other in confusion and concern. If none of those Grimm can beat her, then who? Momo stopped, as she suddenly realized who Izuku had in mind. Oh. Right. Them. So who do you think can beat this frustratingly furious feline foe? Chapter 84, Nyot, what you think? Okay, time to address some complaints. So some people have had issues with how this woman was able to rip through the security system, in comparison to how 1B did, and had some concerns with how this security system might fare against the MLF. Okay, so the thing about MHA power scaling, is that it is completely and totally unbalanced, and hard to really quantify. Unlike with something like RWBY, there can be absolutely massive differences in power, to the point where a single person can destroy an army of people. This is why the Grimm were being fodderized the last few chapters. Because this woman is incredibly powerful and skilled. She's well above our WBY characters in terms of power, and as such, is above most of the Grimm as well. For whatever reason, despite me not directly stating how powerful she is, people have said that she shouldn't be this powerful. My question is why? It's not like this is too OP for MHA. Endeavor and Mirko would tear through this place just easily. And it's not like I contradicted any earlier statements on how powerful she is because she's a new character. There are no earlier statements on how powerful she is. This is me showing you how powerful she is. But since that didn't seem to be enough, let me tell you. She's about in the same realm of power and skill as Mirko. If the two were to fight, Mirko would still definitely win, but it would be a good fight. Why is she this strong? Well, read and find out. Also please remember that this security system is A, incomplete, and B, not meant to be invincible. Oh, one last thing, someone said the Fialong was too big for the woman to do things she did with its mask and head. The Fialong's head is only slightly larger than a person's body. Meaning it's exactly big enough for her to do that. Anyway, let's get into the chapter. As a woman could see the house in the distance. And she was approaching quickly. Seems like the test is almost over. The woman breathed a sigh of relief. The fatigue was really starting to set in now. Honestly, she hoped there weren't too many fights from this point on. And then suddenly a wyvern flew over her, before turning midair, and few yards in front of her. Ugh. I like a good fight and all, but I'm really getting tired of this. The woman said as she got into a fighting pose. She dashed under its head, and slashed at its throat. However, this did minimal damage, just creating some light scratch marks. Crap. The woman cursed, realizing this thing was gonna be tough. The wyvern raised its head, and the woman dashed back to avoid being crushed, as the draconic creature slammed its head down into the dirt. The woman then jumped on top of the wyvern and started slashing at the exposed parts of its back. However, this still didn't do all that much damage. Damn, this thing is tough. The woman cursed before suddenly she felt the wyvern start to rise. The wyvern flapped its wings and started rising, off the ground, into the air. As the wyvern ascended and changed angels, its head pointing up towards the sky, the woman lost her footing and started to fall off the creature. She tried to dig into it with her claws, but they couldn't dig in deep enough to keep her from falling. However, before she fell off the creature entirely, she managed to grab onto one of its back spikes and held onto it as the wyvern flew through the air. Okay, I can't hurt it, so how do I hurt this thing? The woman wondered, taking a second to think, before her eyes widened, as she came up with an idea. That might work. But I need to get to its head. I'll have to wait for it to dive down first. I just have to hang. Suddenly, black liquid shot out of its back into the air, and took form as two griffons, that dove at her with their claws extended outwards. Ugh! The woman groaned as she got ready to fight them off. The first griffin had its claws batted away by the woman before she slit its throat, before repeating this process with the other griffin. After that, the wyvern finally changed its position and started flying downwards, causing the woman to fall forwards, towards its head. She let go of the back spike, letting herself fall forward. Then when she got close enough, she grabbed the little curved piece of bone that was at the edge of the wyvern's snout, leaving her dangling in front of its huge maw. The dragon roared, as it tried to snap forward and eat her. However, all this did was flail her about. You want a taste of me, big guy? The woman shouted. Well, bon appetit. She then swung her legs back, and then swung forward, and let go of the snout, flinging herself into the dragon's mouth. The wyvern closed its mouth, not wanting its prey to fall out, as it felt them go down its throat. And for a second, the beast thought it had won. But then it felt the woman tearing apart its insides. The beast stopped flapping, as it felt the horrible pain of its insides getting torn apart by sharp claws. Crash! It fell to the ground, kicking up wind and dirt around it. The beast trembled a bit, before going limp, dying, and fading away. And as the wyvern fully faded, the woman was left there, lying on her back, taking a bit of rest. "Ugh." The woman groaned again. "I really hope that was the last obstacle." A few moments later, the woman got back up and went back to running towards the house. It took a few minutes, but she finally reached the front gates. "Finally," the woman said, as she crouched down, and got ready to leap over the gate. When she heard something behind her, she took a deep breath and turned around. "All right. Come out and fight me." Then, two hounds came out of the forest, one crawling out on all fours, and the other, flying above her with a pair of wings. "This thing again. And there's two. And it can fly," the woman shouted out in shock. "All right, doggies. I know your weakness now, so let's see how long you last." Then, the flying one let out a jet of flames from its mouth, which the woman jumped to the side to dodge. Meanwhile, the other one rushed forward, lunging at her. She was about to dodge to the right, however, she saw that the other hound was waiting for her to dodge, so it could blast whichever direction she chose with fire. So instead of dodging, she would have to approach this situation head-on. She stood up, and ran towards the hound, before sliding under it. Then she brought her feet up, and kicked it into the air, towards the other flying hound. The flying hound caught its ally, before swinging it around and throwing it back at her. The woman jumped up to her feet and lunged upwards at the hound, thrusting her arm right through its neck before it could react and protect itself. She swiped her arm through its flesh, beheading the monster. Both she and the head fell to the ground, a few feet away from each other. The woman turned and dashed towards the fallen head. However, the hound that was still in the air, grew a bunch of arms from its sides and chest, and shot them down at both her and the head. The woman cried as three of the arms hit her, and pinned her to the ground, while another arm picked up the severed hound head, and brought it up towards itself. The woman slashed at the arms holding her down, freeing herself. Unfortunately for her, in that time, the other hound had already grown back its body and dropped back down to the ground. Then both hounds grew armor on their necks. Meaning that same trick wasn't gonna work anymore. Damn, these things regenerate too quickly. If one of them can distract me long enough, then it won't matter if I behead one of them. I either have to destroy their heads or behead them at the same time," the woman said, before her ears detected something odd. "What's that behind me?" The woman then jumped to the side, just in time, as a grim apple landed where she just stood, biting into the ground. "Is that an evil apple?" the woman said in disbelief. She looked behind her and saw that the tree behind the gate, swinging its branches upwards, tossing grim apples into the air, to land on the battlefield. What the fuck? She didn't have much time to be confused about this, as the grounded hound charged at her from her right, while the flying hound dived at her from the left. So she ran straight ahead, past both Grim, and then backflipped to avoid another apple. Both Grim turned around to face her, but then the flying one got hit in the face with an apple, which gnawed into its face, seemingly unable to determine friend from foe. The flying hound pulled the apple off its mask, however, there were some light scratch marks, which quickly healed. Okay, its armor's not as tough as I thought it was. I can use that, the woman thought. And maybe I can use these apples too. More apples rained down on them, and a few of them were heading downward near the woman. She jumped up and kicked a few of the apples at the hounds. The one on the ground jumped to the left to avoid them, while the flying one breathed fire to incinerate them. And while they were distracted doing that, the woman ran to the right of the flying one and lunged at it. Seeing as its mouth was preoccupied shooting fire at the apples, the hound had no choice but to grow two more arms out of its side, and launch them at the woman. The woman smacked the first arm away but then grabbed the second one, flipping midair, and tugging the arm, using it to launch herself at the hound even faster. The woman landed on top of the flying hound, wrapping her legs around its neck. She raised up her arms, and then launched her left arm forward in a thrusting motion, striking the hound's armored head, and creating a large crack in the armor. Just as she was about to plunge her other arm forward and impale the thing's brain, however, the hound had other ideas. Arms grew out of the hound's back, and grabbed the woman's arm, holding it back, before the other arms wrapped around her entire body, trapping her on top of the hound, and holding her in place. "Let go." The woman struggled against the arms, trying to move her raised arm forward, but her fatigue was showing its ugly face, and it was really hard to muster up the strength to free herself. The hound rotated its head around, pointing its maw at the woman, and opened up. She saw the fire start forming in its mouth, and she knew if she didn't free herself now, then she'd be engulfed in flames. Her fight or flight instincts kicked in, and she felt a rush of adrenaline. And with that she managed to free her raised arm, and thrust it into the hound's flaming maw, impaling its brain, and burning her arm. "Shit!" the woman hissed as she felt the flames engulf her arm. Fortunately, it didn't last very long, as with the hound's death, the flames died down, and its wings stopped flapping, and it started falling to the ground. However, as its ally was falling down, the other hound launched its own flamethrower attack at the woman, as soon as the other hound died. "Agh!" The woman cried out in pain as the flames hit her already fire-damaged arm. As soon as the dead and dissipating hound hit the ground, the woman jumped off of it, escaping the flames. However, while she was distracted by that, an apple came flying down, and hit her shoulder, biting down into it. The woman cried as the apple bit into her flesh. Before it could do too much more damage, she grabbed it, and crushed it, causing it to dissipate and vanish. She flipped midair, and landed on her feet, before quickly dashing back into the forest, and hiding behind a tree. The woman was breathing heavily, pain and exhaustion taking its toll on her heavily. She looked at her damaged arm and shoulder. The burns were bad, and wound from the apple was pretty deep and bleeding. She could still move the arm a bit, but for combat purposes, it was pretty useless. Meaning she had to kill this remaining hound, with 3 limbs left. "Alright. Think. How do I kill this thing?" she thought. "It has a brain. So it probably doesn't appreciate getting hit really hard in the head. So I guess I'll just do that." She dashed out from behind the tree, and forward towards the hound, at the fastest speed she could muster. The hound tried to shoot out fire at her, however, the woman got there too fast, and kicked its lower jaw up, forcing its mouth shut. Then she swiped her claw down, leaving a gash in its head armor, and forcing its head down, where she then kicked it to the side, and then kicked it again, and then slashed at it again. She continued to assault its head with attacks, disorienting it, leaving it little time to think. It tried to lunge forward and attack her with its claw, but she jumped back, to dodge it, before jumping back towards it, and continuing her assault on its head. The hound tried jumping back to escape the assault and heal itself, however, the woman jumped forward with it and kept hitting its head, no matter how it tried to run away. The woman was too fast and kept hitting it. Its armor was now thoroughly cracked, and she was doing damage faster than it could heal. Considering its brain was being bashed against its skull, it was rather hard for the hound to think. But it knew that it was going to die. This woman was too strong, and too fast, none of its attacks would land. But at the very least, it could potentially bring her down with it. The woman raised her arm back, ready to thrust it through the hound's brain and kill it, but she hesitated when she saw light leaking from the cracks in the hound's armor. And then its whole body started to glow. Then her instincts screamed at her, "Get away!" She jumped back, and kaboom! The hound exploded, creating a massive blast that engulfed the woman, before sending her flying back, crashing through several trees, before landing a few dozen feet away. "Oh!" the woman groaned. She was in so much pain right now, and it didn't help that it felt like the world was spinning. She laid there for a couple minutes, letting herself recover from that last attack, before pulling herself up to her feet. That explosion did a number on her, creating some more burns on her body, as well as a few other injuries, and she definitely had some broken and bruised bones in her legs, ribs, and arms. Alright. That had to be the last obstetrical, she said to herself as she walked towards the house again. Except maybe that tree. I could probably kill that thing. And so she kept walking, all the way back to the house, ignoring the overwhelming pain she was in. She got back to the gates, only to find they had been blown apart by the explosion. And standing there at the center of it all, was Sanson. The woman's eyes widened. "Oh, I know you, Yura." Without much hesitation, Sanson launched forward, creating several hands to try and grab her. She jumped back, hissing as the pain from all her injuries made this rather difficult to do. And landing was even worse. The pain that came when she hit the ground caused her to freeze for a second, and that second was enough for Sanson's hands to grab her. She tried to struggle out of them. But at this point, most of her strength had been sapped. Sanson's arms raised her up into the air, encasing her body in slime, further trapping her. Once the woman was high enough in the air, she turned her upside down and then slammed her into the dirt. And once the woman's head hit the ground, everything went dark. "Oh!" the woman groaned, as she regained consciousness, and slowly opened her eyes. She was now in Izuku's office, laying on the floor, staring up at Izuku, who was behind his desk. Her body was of course restrained heavily. First, her limbs were stuck together using Minata's balls, then they stuck Minata's balls to each one of her fingers, ensuring she couldn't use her claws, and then finally, she was wrapped in several layers of Sero's tape. And Izuku was not alone in the room either. Kirishima and Okako were also present, standing alongside him. Lastly, there were also two Birangels, holding her down to the ground. "Oh you," the woman groaned as she felt the pain of all her injuries coursing through her body. "You woke up sooner than expected," Izuku said. He was wearing the hood of his robe, so she couldn't see his face, but recognized his voice. "Your caretaker," the woman stated, looking excited. Nice?" Izuku was surprised that she'd refer to him by the title. Typically the only people who referred to him by that name were Kira and her fans. "Who sent you?" Okako asked angrily, getting straight to the point. "Sent me?" the woman asked, looking confused. "Don't play dumb," Okako told her aggressively, giving her an absolutely killer glare. "Who's the person trying to kill Izuku?" The woman once again just looked confused. "I don't know. If I did then I'd slash him with my claws. No one gets away with hurting Lady Kiba's caretaker." Everyone stared at her in disbelief, and for a minute, there was silence. "So Nyao didn't come here to kill me?" Izuku asked. "What? Why would I want to kill you?" the woman asked, looking genuinely shocked. "Wait, if you didn't come here to kill Izuku, then why did you destroy all of the security Grim?" Okako shouted. "Grim. That's what they were called. Thank you, that was bothering me so much." The woman smiled before frowning as she took in the rest of what Okako said. "Wait. Security? Does that mean that wasn't a test?" "A test?" Izuku asked, sounding just as confused as she was. "Yeah, a test. To see if I was good enough for the security guard job," the woman explained. Once again, there was a minute of silence, as everyone stared at her, dumbfounded. "So let's get this straight," Izuku said. "You came here to ask for a job?" The woman nodded, only to stop when she realized that moving was a really bad idea. "Ow. My head. And you thought that I sent the Grim after you, as a test, to see if you were strong enough?" Izuku asked. "Yup," the woman confirmed. "Okay, how would I know to test you for that, if I didn't know who you were, and why you're here?" Izuku asked, poking a massive hole in her logic. The woman's eyes widened, as she realized that her assumption made no sense. "Oh, yeah, that's And you didn't think that if you barged in on his private property, not too long after an assassination attempt, with no introduction, and started beating up our security system, that we might think you were an intruder?" Okako asked. "Oops," the woman said. Once again, there was silence, as the three didn't really know how to respond to such stupidity. "So, about the job?" the woman asked. Izuku slammed his head down onto his desk. That was enough of today. Izuku was too tired to deal with absurdity right now. The next day was rather busy for Izuku, as he had to deal with the cleanup. First, he had to calm down the kids, assure them that there was in fact not actually an assassin, just an idiot. Second, he had to make plans for Yami to spend a day in the city so he could stock up enough negativity to replenish all the Grimm that were destroyed. Third, he had to get to work on constructing a fence around the forest, because apparently, signs weren't enough. And lastly, was dealing with the woman in question. Which lead to this moment, where Izuku was behind his desk, addressing 1A while his mother watched the children. "Okay, so I looked up information about our intruder yesterday," Izuku told them. "Her name is Sori Jaga. And she belongs to the Nekononako Foundation." "The Nekononako Foundation?" Mineta gasped. "I presume you know what that is, Mineta?" Ida asked him. "If Mineta knows what it is, then it's probably inappropriate," Jiro said. "The Nekononako Foundation is a foundation dating back to the era when quirks first appeared," Mineta explained eagerly. "You see, back when the first people with cat quirks came into existence, people realized how much money could be made in less than ethical ways. So they gathered pretty much everyone they could with a cat-related quirk, and started selling, buying, and breeding cat girls for profit. This was illegal, of course, and their practices were pretty much slavery combined with eugenics, so when heroes came around, they busted up these businesses pretty quickly. But when the cat people got free, they realized they too could make the same amount of money their captors did and made the Nekononako Foundation the world's leading business in cat girl related, well, anything you want to rent a cat girl maid. Done. You want a cat girl to call you Anya-chan. You go to them. You want to adopt a baby cat girl. You can get that too. Every cat girl is bred and trained to be the best in their field. And that typically means they're all either super cute or super hot. So basically, they take people with cat quirks, pay them to have sex with each other, then either sell the baby to someone who ordered it, or train them from birth and essentially force them to be fetish fuel for money," Taru said, no one being able to see the disgust on her face. "Well, I mean, it's less hot when you say it like that," Mineta responded. "Leave it to Mineta to know the history of a morally shady company that runs on cute girls," Sero said. "Well, thank you for saving me the trouble of explaining it at least," Izuku told him. "Anyway, Sori is one of their new lines of combat cat girls, meant to be rented out as bodyguards, called Cat Girls. That name is terrible," Shoji stated bluntly. "Yeah, anyway, her quirk is called Ultimate Breed," Izuku explained. "Essentially, after a couple hundred years of breeding different cat girls together, she a perfect mix of every big cat you can think of, put together to create the ultimate feline predator, combined with human aspects to make her even more deadly. She's stronger, faster, and tougher than any other cat girl in existence. At least that's what the website said, and after seeing what she did to the Grimm, I'm inclined to agree. She even got a bodyguard license at an astonishingly young age. A bodyguard's license was a lot like a hero's license, in that allowed the use of a quirk to combat criminals, but it was much more limiting. Someone with this license was only allowed to use their quirk in case their contractor is threatened. Anything else is still illegal. Getting one isn't extremely difficult though, as the test was said to be hard, that with all the training you'd need to do to pass it, you might as well just become a pro hero. As such, most people opted to just become pro heroes instead, as being a hero came with fewer limitations and more fame. As such, people with bodyguard licenses were rare but very powerful. "So why did she come here?" Todoroki asked. "Well, after the police took her away they got the full story," Izuku told them. "Apparently, She was a huge fan of Kiba, and after seeing the assassination attempt on me, and then realizing that I was hiring staff, decided to see if I would hire her to be part of security. It never occurred to her to just call me ahead of time, or use the front gate, and when the Grimm started attacking her, she thought we were testing her to see if she was skilled enough for the job. So she's just an idiot then, Jiro said. Yeah, geez, even I'm not that dumb, Kaminari commented. So what do we do now? Momo asked. Sue them? Well, I have a meeting with a representative of their company, to discuss how we'll handle this going forward, Izuku said. Which is why I called you here. I need you to make sure the kids stay away from the office and don't do anything regrettable in retribution. The meeting is in an hour, so I would prefer if you did this now. Understood. The children will be under our watchful eyes, Ida said. Class 1A. Time to get to work. Right. They responded. An hour later, the representative had arrived. Izuku didn't know what to expect, but he did expect this. The representative was around his age seemingly, and was of course a cat girl, with long pink curly hair, and pink ears and a tail, wearing a rather provocative red dress, that gave pretty much everyone a clear view of her feminine assets. Assets that she had an abundance of, to say the least. Alongside her were two much taller and older bodyguards, wearing the same outfit Sori was wearing, implying it was some kind of uniform. One that showed off more skin than Izuku was comfortable with. Although given that this was a company that sold based on cuteness and sex appeal, maybe this is exactly what he should have been expecting. And to be fair, it was pretty effective as Izuku's face immediately went red, and he had to banish quite a few stray thoughts away. Hey there, she said in a voice that was obviously meant to be seductive. I'm Mutrasaku. And I'm the representative of the Nekonanko Foundation. A pleasure to make you acquaintance. She gave him a wink, and slowly sauntered her way to the seat in front of his desk. Hello, Izuku said, taking a moment to compose himself. I am Izuku Midoriya, head of the Midoriya Foundation. It is nice to meet you as well. Now, I believe we should get down to business. Right. Business. She said, before putting on a fake sad expression, and holding her finger up to her lip. We are so sorry about what happened with Sori. She's always been the dullest knife in the drawer, if you know what I mean. But she's so fast and strong, it's hard for us to keep an eye on her. Still, we'd be willing to do anything to make it up to you. Yutra then leaned over his desk, getting way too close for Izuku's liking, and making his heart beat way too fast. Anything. I have no intention of suing you, please stop, Izuku told her firmly, trying his hardest to look solely at her face. Yutra gave him a surprised look, before leaning back. I see. It was then that her entire personality changed. The way she sat, moved, the look in her eye, the way she carried herself, everything became less seductive and more casual. So what is it that you want exactly? Yutra asked him, her voice far more serious. I've heard you're a nice guy and all, but I doubt you'd let us go scot-free after something like this. What I want is simple. I would like to have Sori Jaga under my employ. Yutra's eyes went wide. Excuse me? Look, I understand that this may come as a surprise, however, while her assault on my security was horribly stressful, it also proved two things. 1. My security would be ill-equipped to take on extremely powerful villains. As while ultimately my security did greatly weaken her, I had to resort to sending out one of my own daughters to take her down. I don't think I need to tell you how much a failure I feel like as a father, having to do something like that, even if there was 0% chance she would lose. My children should not be fighting killers. At least not until they become pro-heroes. Izuku explained. And the second thing her assault proved to me, is that she is extremely powerful. More so than many pro-heroes. As such, having her under my employ as head of security would make me feel a lot better about my kids' safety, as well my own. I see. Yutra purred, and Izuku see the wheels turning in her head as she thought of how to get the best deal possible out of this. Eventually, her expression settled into a sinister Cheshire Cat grin. Well, I think we can come to an agreement where everyone wins. Normally we don't allow things like this. We only offer rentals for services. However, given this incident, we're more than willing to be flexible and offer up her contract for a price. Considering the offense she committed, and how badly it'd look if this went public, I hope this price isn't too high, Izuku told her in a warning tone. Well, you have to understand, she is our most powerful fighter, Yutra said. And we spent years cultivating her skills, training her, feeding her the best foods and vitamins to make her the perfect warrior. So in selling her to you, we'd be losing years' worth of time and money. We can ultimately make another one, but still, you understand her value, right? Of course. And you understand your situation, right? Izuku asked, his tone not wavering. Of course, she said without a hint of worry. Now then, shall we negotiate the price? Well, I really fucked up, didn't I? Sori thought as she laid in her hospital bed. It was 2 days after her break-in, and she was really surprised she was not in prison. Because in retrospect, she'd done something really, really dumb. Breaking into private property, destruction of private property, and illegal use of work. Seriously, how was she not in jail? Oh, I don't even want to think of what boss is gonna do to me. Sori grimaced. I'm gonna be eating cat food for months. Then, suddenly, the door opened, and Izuku came in, holding a clipboard. Hello, Miss Jaga. Izuku greeted her formally, pulling up a seat next to her bed. Seat caretaker? Sori's eyes widened in surprise. Oh shit, I am so sorry about breaking onto your property and thrashing your security. Seriously, my bad. Izuku sighed. Well, thank you for the apology, and at the very least, you'll get the chance to make it up to us. Huh? Sori gave him a confused look. What does that mean? It means, I purchased your contract from Nekonanko, Izuku said, showing her the clipboard with her new contract. Her eyes somehow got even wider. Wait, really? Izuku nodded. While did nearly give me a heart attack, you also proved to be more effective than anything my security system has to offer. As such, I went out of my way to do this. It cost quite a bit, so please don't disappoint me. I can't believe it. I get work for Lady Kiba. Sori grinned with stars in her eyes. I won't disappoint you, sir. I'll start work right away. You're in a hospital bed. Izuku pointed out. Oh right. Sori realized, looking down at her bandaged-up body. Izuku sighed. You can start once you recover from your injuries. Yes sir. Sori responded, trying to salute him, only to realize that she still could not move. Please don't keep making this mistake, Izuku asked her. I can only promise to try, Sori responded. Author's notes. Alright, so we got the first employee. Although we won't be seeing her and I want to talk about the Hound for a minute and make things clear. Firstly, the Hound is not, by any sense of the word, alive. Secondly, the Hound's ability to think is run by a human brain. Meaning it can be overwhelmed, and if you hit hard enough in the head, it impairs its ability to think, and can even give it brain damage. This is why her tactic of, hit it really hard in the head, worked. Anyway, you may also be thinking that her quirk wouldn't make her that strong or fast, but big cats are not something to be underestimated. Not to mention her powers come from a breed of big cat that does not actually exist, but is even stronger than the ones that do.